What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody had a good week. I just had a couple of announcements before this week's show got started. I basically have a favor to ask, a slight call to action. A lot of you may know I work really hard at doing this podcast. I really want it to be my career someday, and I'm pushing for it harder than it might show in some of the things I might release. But I'm pushing very hard. I'm working very hard, working behind the scenes to make this podcast a career. So I just want to ask a favor to everyone. Uh, just please check out, all the ways to listen. I know everyone has 3 to 4. I think I have maybe 4 podcasts total that I listen to every week, every day that come out. Podcasts generally drop once or twice a week. Well, the third to fourth place podcast always is one that you don't listen to all the time, but sometimes the other episodes or the other shows that you listen to don't put out a show. Sometimes the other shows you listen to shows are crap that week. So you go to the third and fourth place podcast. I want to be your third place podcast. You don't like that show anyway. So why not replace it with someone is putting effort into it? I'm not saying you don't like my show. I really want you to. I'm saying it made the third or fourth place in your my eyes missed. It made the third and fourth place in your listing because it's not your favorite, but it's always there. Well, I want to be your favorite, and I'm going to always be there. I'm 8 to 10 weeks ahead already. So make me your fourth place podcast. I really want to be your third. I really want to be the third one you go to because I'm bringing good guests. I'm switching more to scientific, I want to say experts, scientific opinions. I'm vetting people more these days. I know sometimes the episodes don't show that, but I am vetting people more these days. I'm looking for authors. I'm not coast to coast. I'm looking for documentarians. So just trust me on this. Check out all the ways to listen. I'm on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio. I'm on Amazon podcasts, several other ones. If you check out bobbydizzle.com, all the ways to listen are there, and especially on YouTube. All the shows drop on YouTube first, and I appreciate all the YouTube subscribers and all the YouTube listeners. But I just want my channel to be followed, not just my YouTube. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm a podcaster first. I'm just saying I love YouTube. All my shows drop on YouTube first, but I want you to enjoy the what's the word? The breadth of what I put out first as a whole, because I'm not just a YouTuber. I'm going to do other things. I have another channel that you don't even know about. There's that mystery, huh? Scooby-Doo ending. So just please follow me on all the ways to listen. If you listen on audio, iTunes, Spotify, all that, bobbydizzle.com. And be sure to share the episode you like with your friends. I really want to grow. I want to get bigger. I want to have other shows that are better than this. I don't be pigeonholed into the paranormal and the Bigfoot and just this high strangeness thing forever. So help me out. Help me help you be help me help you be entertained by being entertained and have a reason to push forward. So without further ado, just click that subscribe button, if you will. Head on over to bobbydizzle.com and follow me on all the audio apps, and share with all of your friends. And I hope you enjoy this episode. It was a very fun one, and thanks.
I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it. I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.
What's up, everybody? In the future here, we're doing a little pre-record on Christmas week. So There might be a little bit more lackadaisical off my game, but it doesn't matter. I've got my favorite kind of guest on, or one of my favorites, an author. And authors always have their shit together. I don't know why.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just saying, you always got a shtick. You're always ready to sell that literature, baby. But you're also a paranormal investigator, author, and Bigfoot enthusiast. So it's a total package. I'm ready to talk. I've been ready for it all week, and I don't know how I let it slip my mind in the last 20 minutes of the. I dropped the ball in the fourth quarter. I had it won.
It's not that bad.
Oh yeah, I've done much worse and forgot it even happened. The next day, the person says, "Hey, do you know we had a podcast?" I'm like, oh. All of a sudden, I'm Simba in a gorge. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I was having a lot of fun."
Yep. Again, we've all done it. Literally.
Oh yeah. So what's up with your What do you like about Bigfoot? Do you do research? I saw you do a couple of books on them.
Well, so it's not that
Bigfoot.
I'm. Yeah, it isn't that I am specifically a Bigfooter. I tend to, for some reason, I've sort of landed in the Bigfoot field.
It absorbs you.
It does, but that's really not. Again, that's not really my focus.
Yeah.
So a little background on me. Again, Texas is where I'm at, so we do have Bigfoot. Again, one of the biggest events was the Lake Worth Monster in Fort Worth, which is right down the road. And so a lot of that filtered through where I grew up. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I'm not really a Bigfooter per se, but he does, they do seem to pop up with a lot of what I do.
Been to a couple conferences too, from what I've seen.
Oh yeah, I've been around.
Oh yeah.
And so again, for me, I'm more of I would consider myself a biblical paranormal researcher. And it's just, as far as Bigfoot's concerned, he falls into the category in two different ways, right? Because my current model for the elusive cryptid is that what we've done is that we're either accidentally or we're being manipulated by the phenomena to put at least two different phenomena in the Bigfoot box, right? One is paranormal, one is physical. So I think that on any given day, I'm really good with saying, 30 seconds away from saying it's all paranormal and I'm done, right? However, there's too much physical evidence that you don't typically get with, with paranormal phenomena.
Oh yeah, ghosts.
That allows me it's just too much for me to say this is okay, we're good, we can move on. However, there's also a lot where it's like, this is clearly not a biological entity that we are dealing with. Well, the obvious question is, how can it be both? And the answer is because it isn't one thing. We're taking at least two different phenomena and putting it in the box, labeling it Bigfoot, and then we're arguing over it. You wake up in the middle of the night in your bed, and there's a giant black figure with red glowing eyes. It's a shadow person or a demon or fill in the blank, right? Whatever paranormal word you want to use. You do the same thing in the woods. You unzip your tent, and there's the same giant human, dark humanoid figure with red glowing eyes. It's immediately a Bigfoot. Well, that's the problem. It's very, very clear that there is a paranormal phenomena that is occurring. And there's a lot of, associated paranormal phenomena with certain areas that are supposed to be Bigfoot. But then we have these other encounters that seem far more infrequent. They never seem to happen necessarily in the same place twice, but maybe, same 20-mile area that it seems to pop in and then sort of moves on, right? And there's physical evidence attached to it. It just looks like what we have is two different phenomena, and we're mislabeling them. Maybe they're both Bigfoot. I mean, we're calling them both Bigfoot. We just need to pick one and then give the other one another name. Or maybe none of them are Bigfoot, and that what we think of as Bigfoot is another separate phenomena. There could be 3 or 4 different phenomena going on, but at least there's 2. And what we're trying to do is separate them out and allow people to say, hey, hold on, let's have a different conversation. Maybe it doesn't need to be blood versus, supernatural or natural versus
woo versus flesh and blood.
Right. Maybe the conversation needs to be, okay, how do we know which one we're dealing with? How do we narrow it down? Because I would argue that's one of the fundamental problems that we have, is the reason we're not really advancing in this research, that we're using the wrong criteria.
Mhm.
So we don't even know what we're dealing with 9 times out of 10 to know how to appropriately handle the information that we're given. Because up until very recently anyway, a lot of these encounters that are clearly paranormal would have the high strangeness scrubbed.
Mhm.
So as far as
The
you're
BFRO
concerned,
ones.
yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
it's not just the BFRO, although they have done it a lot. The problem is now we have all of these paranormal encounters mixed in with these other sightings, and we don't know which is which. Now, that doesn't mean, and this is where things get worse, maybe the problem is it is a paranormal entity that can become visible. Now, that's an option, right? People can call it the quantum
Oh,
Bigfoot,
yeah.
and I think that's just sort of a, no offense to Ron Moorhead, love the guy, really do. Met him numerous times, spoken with him several times, love the guy. So this is not don't take this as an attack on him. I have a problem when people try and throw sci-fi words on phenomena to avoid saying supernatural, because that's what you're dealing with at that point. You're
Mhm.
trying to avoid using terms like like supernatural, paranormal, angels, demons. You're trying to avoid that. You're trying to give it this veneer of science when you're just doing the same thing that Star Trek did, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And like, it's photon torpedoes. Are you telling me it's a torpedo made of light? Like, what are you telling me? It's a quantum torpedo now. What's quantum about? Like, what do you mean? What does this mean? Right?
Double
It's throwing that
magnetosphere.
veneer. Exactly. It's just throwing this thin veneer of science over it to try and make it seem like you're not addressing the supernatural when you really are. Again, at this point, I think the third option is viable. But for now, until proven otherwise, I think a good sort of way to look at the phenomena is we have phenomena that's intermingling, for either on our side accidentally or deliberately on that side. They want us to think they're both the same thing, but it appears there's two different phenomena,
Mhm.
and we need to be able to separate them out, or we're never really going to move forward.
It's like they piggyback almost. Like you
Yes.
get one, you get the other, but like one begets the other a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you hear people say the orb shows up and it turns into a Bigfoot.
Right. Which,
Yeah.
and so that's that's a really interesting point. And the thing is, the truly paranormal stuff does seem to behave very, very differently, right? There's
Mhm.
plenty of stories of people just, hey, there's this thing in the road and it left, and then there's no paranormal associated with it at all. But then you have these others. And my thing is, if it was a ball of light and then you see a Bigfoot and you think it turned from one to the other, then what makes you think that the Bigfoot's what it really looks like?
Yeah,
If
it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're dealing with something that's inherently a shapeshifter, right? If you're dealing with phenomena that changes how it appears, then you don't know what at any stage what you're looking at is what it is. And I think that's a big mistake that we make. It's like, if we have what appears to be a Bigfoot, but we have all this other associated paranormal phenomena, you need to question if the Bigfoot is what you're actually seeing. And that's,
Yeah.
again, that's a question that we need to ask. One of the things while doing the research for Metroplex Monsters, this sort of set me on the idea of the phrase I use all the time now, that folklore is not phenomena. And what I started noticing is looking at the Goatman bridges all over the DFW. Just they're everywhere, right?
Mhm.
Well, what happened was I started noticing it was when you put them all side by side, while there would be differences, there were exact phraseologies that were identical in all of them. And I was like, hold up, this isn't just a coincidence. It's literally word for word. And so I looked at the Lake Worth Goatman articles that Jim Mars wrote. And it became very, very clear. People were taking essentially old school copy and pasting those ideas from these articles and laying them over these locations. The name Goatman just said, okay, we're going to transpose this over here. That's folklore. That's folklore is how we as people, as a culture, deal with phenomena, right? It doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's right. It just means it's us dealing with it. And what I saw was, okay, on a lot of these Goatman bridges and locations, this was all earlier, older phenomena, right? Like the Old Alton Bridge in Denton. That's the hanging man. That is the hanging man, or the hangman's bridge. It is a story that you find virtually on every old iron truss bridge in America. It's all variations of the same theme. You knock 3 times, you honk 3 times, you flash your lights 3 times,
turn your lights off, turn your car off.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the same. It's literally all the same thing. It's the hanging man thing, but the Goatman motif gets laid on top of it because of Jim Mars, because of the Lake Worth Goatman event. And then people lay the mythology on top of it. Now where things get really, really weird is White Rock Lake, where people see an actual goat man. And that's where things get really bizarre, because it's like, okay, we didn't have these accounts prior, and it looks like Lake Worth was really just a Bigfoot. But because the word Goatman, or the name Goatman, was used and popularized in the 60s, around there, now we're seeing a goat man in the area. But when he moves away from White Rock Lake proper, when he goes to the tributaries and the areas around, he seems to lose some of his goatiness, right? The horns disappear. He becomes a little bit more lean. Like he starts looking almost what we would call a gray, just very, very tall. So it begs a lot of questions of, when we're looking at all of it, right, in totality, if we stop and sort of remove the titles and we say, okay, let's look at the lore, but let's understand what the lore is. It's folklore, which is humans trying to deal with it from a culturally accepted perspective. And we can't take that as gospel. That's not what it is. It's people dealing with it. But when you kind of take that bigger step back, you start noticing very definite patterns. And we need to start doing this more often to start figuring out what's paranormal, what's physical, when do the two meet, so we can start really having more educated conversations and actually maybe get to something here. You know, the best stuff we have is essentially still 60 years old. And that's a problem.
Yep. And then that might not even be the best stuff we have either. That could be a complete hoax.
Yeah. I mean, again, right now, the best evidence shows that it's, would lead you to think that it's real. But again, okay, it appears real. So, and again, best arguments that can be made is that it's real. Okay, great. Again, could it still be fake? Yeah, that makes it a really good hoax, but I tend to think it's real. Or again, the evidence would lead me to conclude that it's real. But the problem is, if it is, why haven't we gotten anything as good or better over the last 60 years?
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is that camera wasn't electronic. And he kind of snuck up on him on a horse, but that's about it.
Well, I think so then the whole electronic thing, right? Because I've had the same thoughts. Like, what if it's about the electronics? Well,
I mean, it's spring loaded, like on that movie, Nope.
Yeah,
I think Nope told how it was done.
And so it's like, if it is electronic, then we've got that's a bigger question. Why is it that why would they be so sensitive to electronics? Right. Now, again, maybe it's the fact that it was on horseback. Maybe it's not the electronics themselves. It's the fact that they were on horseback. So the creature didn't, Patty didn't, when she heard it, it didn't freak her out. It's like, okay, it's another quadruped. This isn't something I need to be worried about. And so it just goes about its day. And by the way, in a lot of these events, when it looks like it's an actual physical creature, 9 times out of 10, they don't seem to care at all. They're just doing what they're doing. They're like, oh, it's a human, whatever, and moving on, right? When they stop to really interact, that's when things start getting weird. That's when you got to start questioning whether or not it's actually a material creature that you're dealing with, or if it's something that wants you to think that it's something. Again, one of those ideas of folklore not being the phenomena, if you, again, take that step back, remove the names, you'll start seeing how often there's overlap in Bigfoot lore with like the lore of the Fae. right?
Mhm.
In Ireland, they're called fairy braids on horses, where the horses' manes get little,
Oh,
so
yeah,
these
yeah.
little braids. People over here, they'll call them witches' braids, but they'll also call them Bigfoot braids.
I've heard of those. The little
Yeah,
just
and people
random knots in a horse mane.
exactly, and people say, "Oh no, Bigfoots are coming up and they're talking to the horses and they're braiding the hair," and you're like, that is Fae lore. That is what you hear in Ireland and on the continent about how the Fae operate. That they will go and hang out with horses and they'll braid their hair. It's the same. It's literally the same thing. Also, where are the Fae to be found? And again, don't think fairies like Disney. Think just spirits, right? Because 9 times out of 10, they really don't look that different from humans. Sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they're not. But where are they to be found? In the earth, often in caves that you can't find, that disappear. Okay. What is the thing? What is a theme that keeps popping up over and over again with Bigfoot lore? They live in caves in the
Yep.
earth that we can't find.
Disappear.
That just it's like, okay, hold up. Doesn't this bother anyone else?
It's really exciting me right now. Let me tell you, I wasn't ready to go to this deep this quick, and I'm into it. I'm all freaking for it. By the way,
I should probably say I'm Jason.
I thought
McLean.
we were talking about books. I'm way okay.
Hey,
I'm way okay with this.
Please, we'll go as deep.
Hell yeah.
I interviewed Joshua Cutchin, probably one of the most important researchers working today. He's not a Bigfoot researcher per se, but he's a true academic, and he has a book called "Where the Trackways End." I think the best thing he's written is, and honestly, the most important thing is Ecology of Souls. It's a massive tome, but if you want to be serious in any of these fields, you need to look at what he's written there. But one of the things he points out is here's and this is where I would throw my history in on this. We tend to look, it's like, oh, here's the hairy man traditions in American Indian lore. That must be Bigfoot. That's our assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
We are putting that on that lore. We're saying, oh, it's hairy man lore. That must mean, or wild man lore. That must mean Bigfoot. That's us. That's not them. That's not those elders. That's us putting it on there. So that's something we need to remember. But there is wild man lore of a tribe in Alaska. And one of the things it talks about is if a Bigfoot gives you, or whatever, I forget what the term that they use, if they give you salmon, you're not supposed to eat it. Otherwise, he will take you into their world. And if you hold on to it, once the Bigfoot leaves, it turns into tree bark. Now, anyone who's familiar with Fae lore, classic Fae lore, should recognize that immediately. If you eat anything in the fairy world, you stay in the fairy world. And when you're done with the encounter, what happens? When they give you things like gold or food, but you don't eat it, but you still have it, once the encounter's over, it turns into leaves or hay or fairy dust. This is where the idea of fairy dust comes from, is they give you the gold, right? You get the fairy gold, and but then once the encounter's over and you've left their realm, it turns to dust. That's the same. It is the exact same motif, same familiar patterns. And again, how often do we hear, I shot it, but it didn't fall down, or I went back and it was gone, right? Or I had, there was the body and I came back and the thing had completely disappeared. Over and over and over again, we see the same. Again, remove the word Bigfoot from it in its Fae lore, line for line, note for note.
Interesting.
We should not turn away from that, because what it means is, again, I'm not saying there isn't a physical creature running around out there. I think there is. I think there's good evidence for that to be the case. However, we cannot turn away from the fact that a lot of people may not be encountering this creature. In fact, more often than not, we may be encountering things that were the Fae, 200 years ago. They were the Jinn 1,000 years ago. They were the Leshy. They were the Shahadim. They're spirits. They are this other thing that's always been here. And it's just got this whole new facade. And again, maybe that's us putting it on them, maybe they want us to think that they are Bigfoot so that we don't recognize them for what they are, and they can interact with us a little bit more freely with our guard a lot more down.
Interesting. I've considered them being like maybe over here in like sort of like somebody would play a video game, and this what they have here is their avatar. But
Yeah.
I've never considered it being part of like a more cinematic universe like the Folklore or something like that.
Well,
Going
but that's
back
the
that
whole
far.
thing. We in the West over the last 150 years or so, really since you could argue the Industrial Revolution, the Age of Enlightenment, we threw away a lot of spiritual and supernatural understanding, right? Even those in the church. My number one complaint is that I hear this all the time is, I don't think any of that's real. And I'm like, you believe in a book that was written by a supernatural being through supernatural encounters about supernatural events, but you don't believe in the supernatural, then maybe you don't really believe the Bible that you claim to believe in.
I've had a hard time with that concept as well, but that's why I kind of believe in all the other stuff as well. Like
So
this book is full of that.
Yeah, it's like that's the point, is that it's a perspective. Again, fundamentally, I don't care what Bigfoot is or any of it. I saw a living pterosaur, right? I don't care what they are. I do care, however, that I believe that once we understand what they are, they fit into I would argue they're evidence for the world of a biblical worldview. Again, Bigfoot, I think, happens to be on both sides. I don't think that our history is what the mainstream would like us to be told. I think the biblical account is far more accurate. And so when you have things like giant relic hominids, it's because they didn't die out tens of thousands of years ago. They're still around because they survived the flood. That's why we see living dinosaurs. That's why we see all these other creatures like the unicorn, which is just a elasmotherium, a giant woolly woolly rhinoceros. The reason we have these accounts of people encountering these creatures that supposedly went extinct thousands or millions of years ago is because they didn't go extinct tens of thousands or millions of years ago. They are the evidence of the fact that the modern worldview is not correct. Same thing with the paranormal. On the paranormal side of Bigfoot, if there are paranormal entities wandering around and their behavior matches certain patterns, then we got to deal with that. And I think that's more indicative of a biblical worldview. But the problem is, in the West, we're like, nope, we like bolts and cars and screwdrivers. And so we're just going to throw all of it out. And so our supernatural worldview is very, very anemic. Half the time we don't even have language to understand it. And we chalk it all up to stuff that Disney puts out. And it's like, guys, this is not the Disney version, is not the real version. And so I think it puts us in, again, it puts us sort of behind the eight ball on this. Is if we're trying to have a reasonable conversation and really explore this phenomena, but we don't even have the language to handle this 9 times out of 10, because we're not looking at it holistically. We're not looking, we want to put things as I'm a Bigfoot researcher. Okay, great. I research pterosaurs. I research this. I research the UFOs. It's like, hold on. Maybe the bigger issue here is if we took that one step back and we started looking at the through lines, we would notice a lot of these things overlap way more than we want them to. And that should bother us. Because again, if it's a ball of light over here, it's a giant ape thing over here. But all these phenomena and all these conversations, the events that we see around them, also line up perfectly with what we see with the Fae and often with UFO encounters. Maybe the problem is what we're seeing isn't what it really is. It's something else. And it's something that doesn't want us to recognize it for what it is, because that makes it vulnerable. And maybe it's perfectly okay with us thinking it's a giant hairy ape man or an alien or whatever, because as long as we think it's one of those things, we are more comforted by it. It allows us to be more vulnerable to what it's really doing to us.
That makes a ton of sense. I just wondered, like you said, why it would pick ape man. I guess it just seems more along the lines of what we would consider acceptable to see.
Yeah.
out
Well,
just wandering around.
have you ever read Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis?
Yeah, I've not read them completely, but I've definitely read over them. Read through
There's
them.
there's a line, and I'm going to butcher the line.
Wormwood? Is that the Wormwood?
Yeah, Wormwood. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a scene where Wormwood or Screwtape, sorry, is writing to Wormwood, and Screwtape basically theorizes that there would be, because he's explaining the difference between making the human that he's trying to tempt into damnation. He's like the difference between a witch and a materialist, right? And he's going over the pros and cons of each. And essentially, with a witch, you can torment them directly, but the problem is you run the risk of losing them because at some point they have to consider, well, if I'm dealing with demons, then God may be real too, and they have to deal with that one way or the other. A materialist, it's not fun because you can't torment them because their entire worldview is based on the idea that this pen is all there is, right? We're all meat and bone, and that's it. There's nothing supernatural. So he says it's not fun because we can't torment them. However, they're far more secure because odds are they're not going to think about God. At the end of the dialogue, Screwtape puts out this idea of the materialist witch, something where a demon could interact with you directly, torment the person directly, but at no point does the person's mind ever think of God, because as far as he's concerned, this supernatural encounter that he's having is purely physical. So he calls it the materialist witch. A lot of what we see out here, I would argue, falls under that banner of the materialist witch. You are engaging with something supernatural, and I would throw a lot of, it's not all of it, but a lot of what we call the UFO phenomena falls under that idea where it's, oh, well, of course they can walk through walls and levitate me and talk to me telepathically. They're aliens.
So technology far more advanced.
Exactly. Well, of course the Bigfoot can cloak and turn itself invisible or disappear and teleport away or talk to me telepathically. It's a super highly evolved creature, right? These are all clearly supernatural encounters, but there's a veneer of the materialist on it. So it's not, oh, I'm dealing with a supernatural entity. Again, we put a cloak, again, the sci-fi, right? Here's the sci-fi Star Trek word that we can throw on it to make it more cuddly to me. And I don't have to realize, hey, maybe this thing isn't what it claims to be. Because if it can talk to you, it can lie to you. That's sort of my basic rule. If it can talk to you, it can lie to you.
That's a good concept. That's like a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. So again, I do think there's material. I think what I saw, again, a living pterosaur, I think what I saw was material, and I've got reasons for it. So I think there are material creatures out there just doing their thing. But I also think I do think it's not the majority of the encounters, because too many of these encounters, there's too much associated paranormal phenomena. And we do ourselves, I think, not just a disservice, but a danger to ignore those overlaps.
I've never thought of it that way before. It's kind of blowing my mind putting them all together, even though obviously UFOs and Bigfoot are together a lot nowadays. Seems to be the going thing, along with the what I call the tactical bro cryptid is the Dogman.
Yeah. Well,
Like
so here's the thing, though.
Popularity.
But Bigfoot and UFOs were always associated. It's never not been associated. You can find things in the 70s. Yeah. In the late 60s, early 70s, where they're talking about, hey, yeah, they're the sky brethren. Like they were a form of alien. Like you can find that. It's always been there. But I
thought that was like a recent last 10-year kind of thing.
No. Oh no. It goes all the way back. All the way back. But so let's stick on the UFO thing, then we'll come back to the Dogman thing, because it all connects. Why is it that all the UFO knots, that all of the aliens looked very, very different 50, 60 years ago? Right? Look at those early accounts. They look like the Hobkinville goblins, right? They literally look like goblins. The Flatwoods creature, right? It looks like something out of a 1950s movie. It isn't until, and by the way, like I did a whole thing on the Betty Barty Hill thing on my show Mysterious Library. I've sort of semi-retired from podcasting. I do guest spots now. But on Mysterious Library, we talked about the Betty and Barney Hill thing. And that's one of the things that we were pointing out is their initial reports didn't have anything that looked like we would consider an alien. In fact, Barney Hill said they looked like they were Irish with big noses. The whole alien appearance shows up much later in their as they keep doing these these hypnotic suggestions on. It evolves later, and yeah, I don't think we can ignore the fact that when we start getting the weird alien look comes 1 week after I forget the name of the episode, but Outer Limits has this episode where the creature kind of looks like a gray. And it's not until after that television broadcast is done that we start getting the grays. Well, once Betty and Barney Hill's story blows up, then we start seeing the aliens look more and more like the gray. Well, the question becomes, why is it that they didn't look like that to start off with? Why is it the grays never showed up until after Betty and Barney Hill? Right? So let's bring this back to Dogman. It's like, well, what does this have to do with Dogman? Linda Godfrey, in her book On the Beast of Bray Road, right? What is one of the big stories? It's very clear in that story that you're not dealing with a material creature or a creature that naturally exists, right? I don't even throw out, I won't throw out things like werewolves. I'm like, why? Why would we throw that idea out? But maybe it's not like what we see in Hollywood, but the idea that something has changed into it, I don't think we should throw that out. However,
Skinwalker is basically the same thing.
Yes, again,
nuts and bolts.
This is a concept that's been around in every culture forever. A human who can change into something else, right? And again, I've got accounts of people that either I know directly or have or friends of friends. My wife's family are all they're missionaries. You hear some stories from people out in the bush, and they're like, "This thing happened," right? So I don't think we can really throw those ideas out. But again, my favorite story is there's the guy. Again, this is in her book. He's like a night watchman at a church, and he's going and he's in the graveyard, and this creature, a dog man, right? The Beast of Bray Road is there. It turns, looks at him, and says, "Gadara," and leaves. Well, Gadara is where Jesus cast out demons. It's telling you what it is. And that's sort of the problem is, okay, dogmen, people can't seem to say, well, are their legs like humans or are they like dogs? Well, sometimes they have feet, sometimes they have backwards facing legs. Sometimes the dogmen have horns, sometimes they have hooves, sometimes they're just really big dogs, sometimes they're bipedal, sometimes they're not. Maybe the reason we have such broad ranges of ideas and they disappear. I've got a story again, personal, not personal to me, but someone told me personally. He was a cop, and he was in with his partner in the UK. They're sitting there just doing their thing in a car. They're watching something, and this fog comes in out of nowhere. This dog man walks between the cars, looks around, turns around, and leaves. And they're in the car like, what the heck just happened? And of course, as it leaves, that's when the fog leaves. Maybe the problem is when you're encountering these things, they are taking whatever form they want, or maybe it's a form that is accepting to you. Maybe you're creating that idea in your own head, right?
Giant tulpa.
Right. Well, and yeah, somebody can get me started on that. But the point is, maybe the problem is we're looking at something. We're trying to address the supernatural as if it's a material thing, like this pen. When I turn away, this pen will always look like this pen. It will be made out of plastic, and it has graphite and all of that. It's not going to be something different. Like, I'm not going to come back and this pen is not going to turn into a snake or a telephone or something, right? It's always going to be the pen. My dog will always be a dog. But the problem is, I think we're encountering something that's clearly paranormal that maybe is just changing. Again, maybe it's deliberate. Maybe it's us. We don't know. I tend to think it's deliberate. But we are looking at thinking, well, oh, it's a dog man. That must be what it is. No, it's not. That is the form that it wants you to see it as. Oh, I've seen a Bigfoot. Did you see a Bigfoot, or are you seeing what it wants you to see? That's why when people still talk about seeing, again, goat men. What do you do with that? 7-foot tall dude with goat legs and horns, and you're telling, and it's like you think that's a naturally occurring creature. It disappears in blinding flashes of light, like some Bigfoot do.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
Almost exclusively.
yeah. Now, again, I'm here to say I think there's a material Bigfoot walking around. I think that's the best answer for a lot of the stuff that we get. The problem is we then have to deal with the fact that we have these other things. I'm sorry, but if you're going out to the same field every other night or every night or a couple times a month, and they're always there, I don't think you're dealing with a Bigfoot. If it's, oh, they're always there, and then we can hear them and they're throwing things at us, but anytime we turn on a camera or a FLIR, they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're dealing with a Bigfoot. If you can get them on FLIR, then you're probably dealing with a Bigfoot, right? If it's, hey, we got them on camera, you're probably dealing with a Bigfoot. But if it's
usually the FLIR, they get them before you even know they're there. Like they kind of sneak up on them.
yeah,
You whip it out, they always disappear.
yeah. But if it just disappears, then maybe that's not what you're doing. If you go out and you're Bigfoot researching and you drive 80 miles home and there's a stack of stones in your living room, you weren't dealing with the Bigfoot. If you drive from one end of the natural, national forest, right? You drive around it to your other campsite. You were encountering Bigfoot over here. You drive all the way around on the other side. There's a mountain in between, and then Bigfoot starts pounding on your tent at night. I don't think you're dealing with the Bigfoot.
That makes sense. Or Bigfoot's just not what you think he is totally at all.
Right. Again, option 3.
Yeah.
Option 3 is maybe, again, these things can become material, and while they are material, they are organic, which is why we get fecal matter sometimes and hair sometimes. Is that essentially that's the byproduct of it being material?
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to that idea, but
they
right
have to
now,
play by the rules of the game they're in, basically.
Exactly. Now, again, I think that's an option. I think that's the third option, and it's real hard for me to say. And again, I did have an encounter in Brown Springs that would allow me to say, you know what, that's probably what's going on. But again, we want to keep our head scientifically here. It's like, okay, but we don't really show when we have a lot of these other paranormal encounters and paranormal activity, we don't see the same level of hard material evidence that we get with some Bigfoot encounters. So that's why I'm willing to say maybe we have two different phenomena happening here. Now, here's the problem is, again, when do they overlap? Are they actually overlapping? Why are they overlapping? Is it because they become material? Is it because the material serves the supernatural? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Right?
I think why is the biggest question. Like, why would they do? What's it matter?
Yeah, well, because if Bigfoot isn't on our side? Yeah. It's like this is, but again, we can't get anywhere if we're not willing to ask the questions. If we're so busy fighting over no, they're blood and they're just giant apes, or they're quantity. It's like if we're fighting over that, we're never going to be able to stop and say, well, hold up, how do we know what we're actually looking at is real or a material creature? How do we know? How do we know when we're encountering one versus the other? I think if it's talking to you, that should automatically be your this ain't a physical thing, right? If you have a lot of paranormal overlap, get scratched off the materialist real fast, right? I do a lot of researching at Brown Springs with Tex over at Texas Front Porch. It's what we do, right? First night I'm there with him, and again, I actually had to bring him over to say, hey, maybe you're not really encountering Bigfoot all the time over here. I was the one who had to talk him off that ledge because he's like, no, it's got to be Bigfoot, because he'd seen them in broad daylight there. First time he showed up, one ran across the field, and he's like, well, there's one right there. But he kept having encounters. So we're there. we have our cameras set up. I'm sleeping in my car because we have, how many accounts do we have of them coming up to cars, looking in cars, right?
Yep.
Particularly if you're sleeping
That's
in it.
what campsites they look.
Exactly. And so I have my camera actually inside the car because I want to see if, well, maybe if it's around, it's like it's coming up, it won't recognize it as a camera. So, it was a chance given. I'm never going to call it anything other than a dream. because I don't know that it's not a dream. But in the dream, I'm in my car, right? I'm looking out across the field in front of me, and I see 3 figures coming across the field. And they look like they were made out of fire, but they were contained, right? Like they didn't look like the Human Torch. Did you ever see Wrath of the Titans, the sequel to?
Oh yeah,
Okay, Kronos at the end, how he looks like he's sort of the lava monster.
yeah.
They kind of look like that, meaning it's like it was fire, but they were contained, but it was also dark, right? I could see them walking towards me across the field. I wake up. Great, no harm, no foul. A little weird, but whatever. I see Tex's headlamp bobbing up and down. I'm like, dude, you're going to be driving anything that's going to be coming up to our camp away. What are you doing? And he's like, hey, did you and Randy get up? Were y'all running around? Did y'all maybe get up to pee? Were y'all running around my truck like 30 minutes ago? No, we were not. So
They're kind of dangerous in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the entire point is we're there to be Bigfoot hunting, right? We're trying to let them come into camp, right? That's why we have the cameras set up the way we did. That was the entire point. Well, again, while I'm asleep, Randy's asleep, while we're asleep, he's in his car, I'm in my car, Tex is in his. He's got 2 bipedal things running around his truck. And when he finally gets out, one dashes one way, the other dashes into a tree line that we've got our camera, one of our cameras set up in. He thinks we're messing with him. And I'm like, dude, I was asleep. So we go back, we check the cameras, and of course, one of them ran into this thicket where we had a camera set up. At the same time, I'm asleep and having my dream. Same time that Tex is having this encounter, our camera that we set up has nothing but photo of perfect, crisp, clear photos before that time frame. Has 8 to 10 whacked out, corrupted files we can't access, and then everything after that event is fine and crystal clear again. We can access. So it's like it would be real easy for me to say, look, Bigfoot, all of it, it's all paranormal. Done. That's what. But I can't, because I have too many other encounters of people saying this was just a thing that it was in front of my car and it left, right?
Yeah.
We've got solid handprints. We've got things that, again, that it just appears to be a physical creature that we're dealing with. So I think the problem is there is that thing out there, but then we have this other stuff. And I think maybe we need to stop calling it Bigfoot and find another name for it, because it may be corrupting our data. And I think if we just remove the names and say, let's remove the titles from everything and just say, what is actually being recorded? What are people actually saying they see? What are they actually encountering? We'd move further ahead, because we'd be able to see those through lines. We'd be able to see the overlaps and say, okay, this seems consistent with a biological creature. This absolutely does not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we could then start actually putting the appropriate resources where they need to be. That's all we got to do.
That whole infighting thing just pisses me off sometimes. I used to get in it and just like, no, you don't. Now I'm just like, whatever. You people are never going to come along. It's almost like it's built. It's almost like it's built in by the phenomenon itself to keep us from figuring out what it is.
There you go.
Yep.
And that's the whole point, right? I'm sorry. It's like there's too many people for whom I've seen their lives ruined, right? In all these fields. Plenty of people are perfectly fine, but I've seen this stuff destroy people's lives. And I'm like, why is that a thing? Now, again, I've seen comics destroy people's lives too. So, take it for what it is, right? It is one of those things where it's like anything else, it can become a problem. But there does seem to be an awful lot of vitriol associated with the phenomena. Again, and it's been there from the beginning, right? The 4 horsemen of Bigfoot, most of them hated each other. Peter Burns and all of them, they would fight and yell at each other in the at the conferences. And it's so, I mean, it's there. And again, any good endeavor, you're going to have, conflicts of personality, and that's fine. It's part of the game. I get it. But to your point, it does feel like maybe some of this is artificial, not from the human perspective, but that maybe people are being manipulated into creating this conflict so that we don't see the obvious. And maybe the obvious is a lot of this stuff ain't Bigfoot, but it's something that wants us to think that it is. Or maybe it's something that wants us to think it's a dogman. Or maybe it's something that wants us to think it's an alien. Or fill in the blank, right? It wants us to think it's something other than what it is. Because if we recognized it for what it is, we'd behave very differently.
Yeah, wouldn't. I don't think we'd be camped out in droves in the woods.
Okay.
If we had like some real info.
You want to go really deep on this?
Oh yeah, always.
Okay. All right.
I'm in.
All right. You want to go real deep on this rabbit hole? Why do we knock on wood?
Oh, you talking about like wood knock or like the
well, I haven't gotten
good luck thing?
Good luck. I haven't gotten to the wood knocks yet, but think about it, or the tree knocks. It's like, oh, I better knock on wood for good luck. Why do we do that?
I know I've heard the lore behind it, what happened, but yeah, it's just so it doesn't happen, kind of just to cover our bases.
Well, but where does it evolve from? Elves and fae are associated with trees, right? With nature, the whole, and so you would get blessed, and so a lot of these older traditions, you would be blessed, or you'd get luck, or you would announce yourself by knocking on the tree. You were communicating with them that you were there. So that's how we get the knock on wood. Well, now what are we doing? We're running around in the forest going, here, Bigfoot, Bigfoot, Bigfoot. It's like, okay, that's kind of, isn't that a little bit of an overlap that seems to be a thing?
It really is. That's the knock on wood. That's an old Irish thing. Isn't it? Irish or Scottish? Or is it German?
It's actually all of them. Everyone had it. Yeah, everyone had a version of it, right?
I literally just heard somebody talk about it like last week and explain it. Just couldn't remember.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, is it comes from this older fae lore. But here we are. It's like, well, yeah, are we walking up to the trees and, anybody home? No, we're not doing that.
No, it's a baseball bat.
Yeah, exactly. But so again, it's the veneer of science. That's how they're communicating over great distances. Okay, maybe the Indians didn't seem to think that's what was going on. The First Nations people didn't seem to think that they needed to do that. That's a modern thing, but it doesn't seem to have that connection to the tree knocks. Well, but let's take one step deeper. Why, if they weren't Bigfoot, we wouldn't go camping out in the woods all the time. Well, again, where do you find the fae? In the woods. In the woods. That's where the Leshy is. That's where the Shahadim were, right? They were in the wild. That's where the satyrs and the fauns were. For the Greeks and Romans, they were in the wild. They were off the beaten trail. And what do we do when someone sees a Bigfoot? Oh, hey, there's a Bigfoot over here. What do? We run out there and we research. And we go and we buy mugs with Bigfoot on it. Sorry, right here. And we have dolls with, that's actually Chewbacca. But, you get my point. Like, we have all this Bigfoot swag. Again, no harm against swag. But my point is,
as I look at several on my barnwood table.
Yeah, exactly. But my broader point here is, where, and this is a question I've been asking for a couple of years now, where's the line between research and worship?
The way this is going, there isn't one.
Well, I think that there is. I think there's a legitimate line. That the problem that I have, right? But I have a problem. But the problem is, maybe the issue is the community isn't necessarily really geared up to treat it as research, and it does fall into worship, because that's, again, why would these supernatural creatures want to hide what they are? Again, if the biblical worldview is correct, then we would treat them differently. We would understand what they are and what they're in, and what what at least some of their intentions are. If we put our defenses down because, oh, hey, there's a Bigfoot, it's just a big ape man that can materialize and zip and turn into balls of light and talk to me telepathically, it's still just a big ape man. Okay, then you're not going to be thinking, maybe I need to protect myself spiritually from this thing, because this thing it's like, oh no, it's Harry and the Hendersons. It's our forest brethren.
It's Chewbacca, like you
exactly. It's like, but here's the problem. What if the issue is, as long as that's your perspective, you're going out there, you're giving this thing what it wants. Worship. It's feeding off of you. How many people do we know? If you've been in this, I've been around for a long time. I really have. I haven't always been on the forefront. I've been because I had other things to do, right? In fact, I started off all my stuff really more on the. I mean, I'm a creationist. I'm in eschatology. Most of my work is actually in eschatology. But I realized there just wasn't a lot of people with my perspective publicly talking about it, so that's why I did what I did. But I've seen a lot of people kind of go off the deep end and hurt themselves in their relationships with their families and their relationships with others, and there's for a lot of people I've seen it be very destructive. Again, which I've seen that with comic. I'm a comic fan. I've seen it with comics. I've seen it with We all know that one Star Trek nerd, right? I'm a Babylon 5 guy myself, but I'm just saying we've all
Star Wars.
Yeah, we've all seen the guy, and so it's like I'm not always going to say, well, clearly it's the Bigfoot, but what I'm saying is the people for whom comics or NASCAR or Star Trek or Star Wars consumed their lives and sort of destroyed their relationships with their families and friends, it's because there was a guy who killed himself because Battlestar Galactica went off the air. It's terrible. It's like it was some kid. It was like a teenager, 18, 19, and he killed himself. And that was the original. It was the original Battlestar Galactica, not even the good one. I'm gonna
not even the one with the chick from the Netflix series in it.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's like the original one. The dude committed suicide. So there was a guy who committed suicide when the new trilogy came out, and I understand that now that we've lived through it. But my point is, it's because it went from being entertainment or research or whatever, and became essentially a replacement for their religion, right? I'm gonna, I wear my bias on my sleeve. I am a Christian. There's a cross right there for a reason. I wear I don't need Bigfoot or pterosaurs or any of these things to replace my religion. It's not what makes me me. It's not why I'm here. Again, right? It's like I'm in this field for a reason, but it's a higher reason than just what Bigfoot is. But if Bigfoot becomes your thing, right, or any of this stuff becomes your thing, it becomes a replacement for your religion, then it becomes worship. And maybe that's what these things want. They want access to you, because this is what they feed off of. This is what they get. If they can keep you from living that life, if they can make you self-destruct, if they can create enmity between you and your friends and your loved ones, then they've succeeded. So again, I believe research is real. I think there's a good way to do research. I think we need to do research. I am not saying that there isn't a material creature out there. What I am saying, though, is, and I've seen this on, again, people who are Christian and creationists, and they're researching living pterosaurs. I've heard some stories. I'm like, guys, I don't think that's what you're dealing with, because it's there every night and you don't have any good solid pictures of it. Like, doesn't that bother you? They're supposed to be just reptiles. They're pterosaurs. These are reptiles. Bigfoot, at least you can say it's intelligent. It's an ape. Apes don't like necessarily being seen. I could see, or again, maybe there's something higher than that, but I could see something intelligent avoiding conflict or contact with humans. I can see that. Reptiles ain't doing that. And if they're there every night and you don't have good pictures of them, I got to start asking some questions. And I think it's reasonable to ask questions of why can't you? Again, I know people. I love people who claim that they believe that they believe they're talking to Bigfoot, and I believe they believe they're talking to Bigfoot. But my problem is this: if you think you're talking to Bigfoot, and he's in your backyard all the time, and he's your friend, where's you in the selfie where you're like, and Bigfoot's like where is that picture? Right?
The full frontal, I call it.
Yeah, exactly. Why isn't he photobombing you? Why is it always you got to take? By the way, this is not a camera, people. Just real quick, this is not a camera. This is a cell phone that has a camera that's really, really good at taking selfies up close and pictures of big, landscapes. It is not. The second you start zooming in, you're not zooming in.
You're ruining everything.
Well, here's the thing.
Broad
That-
into pixels.
Yeah, well, they have it. The thing actually has an algorithm. It is creating pixels where none are. It has an algorithm. It's creating. So it actually, this stupid phone has pareidolia. It's designed to look for faces. When I get all these pictures of people saying like, "Well, here's all these faces in these trees," and it's like, guys,
No, man.
did you take them on your cell phone? Yeah. Are you enlarging it 5 times to get there? Yeah. Then that's not even your pareidolia. That's the phone's pareidolia.
It's designed to find the faces in anything. I mean, that's what it's doing the whole time with the little scanner.
Mhm.
That's what drives me nuts, circling a face and a leaf. I'm like, dude, it's not a face.
But that's my point, right?
Yeah.
It's why is it that we don't have where's the Bigfoot doing the duck face? Right? Where's that? Show me that. Why don't you have that picture? And it's like, well, it's because they don't like their pictures being taken. That should bother you. Guys, if your girlfriend doesn't want to be seen with you, you got a problem. She doesn't care for you. or you're the side hustle.
That ain't
Guys,
your girlfriend, man.
Yeah, she ain't your girlfriend. Ladies, if the man doesn't want to have a picture taken with you, he's not that into you. Ladies and gentlemen, if Bigfoot doesn't want to take selfies with you, he's not that into you. And it's probably because he's not really a Bigfoot. He's something else. He's something else that when you take that picture, it will be revealed for what it truly is. And that should bother the ever-loving crap out of you.
Makes you wonder why there's not more pictures of what it truly is, that if anybody gets like a half a snap of one.
Here's the problem. What if we
Or
do?
maybe that's why.
Because maybe that's the problem. What if we are? And the problem is it's because it's not there physically. So these cameras aren't picking them up. How many times do we have people say, no, I swear it was there? Now, again, how many times do we have people say, hey, I didn't know anything was there, and just the thing showed up in the picture? Right? Groovy. I'm cool with that.
Yep.
But it's like, no, it was right there, and I'm taking these photos, and you can't see it in the pictures, right? Okay. Maybe it's because it's not there in a material sense. That's why the camera can't pick it up. And that should, again, it's not cloaking. It's not there. Now, I don't mean that nothing is there. What I'm saying is, in the same way this pen is here, that thing may not be like this pen. We are dealing with something supernatural, and that may be why it's not showing up on your film or on your phone. Or maybe that's why your phone is freaking out whenever you try and take a picture of it. That's why your camera traps are freaking out when they're near. It's not because they
got all those files that were up like you were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has that story. And we have the stories. Again, they did it on Finding Bigfoot has the exact same story. Everyone who's worked in the paranormal has the story. I had a fully charged battery. I went into the location, and all of a sudden, all my camera equipment freaked out. All my batteries decharged. Things started turning off and on. When Josh Gates, they went out to they built a road around in Iceland, I think, Greenland, Iceland, one of those places up north, where they still believe in the fairy, where they still believe in the fae, they still believe in elves. They built a road around this rock because they said this rock is home to elves. They go out there, fully charged camera, it's turning off. Things are turning off and turning on. Again, remove the names from things and look at the phenomena. Don't look at what people say is seen. Look at what people say they see. And you start noticing real fast that a lot of this stuff the Venn diagram is a friggin' circle in a lot of this stuff. And that should bother you. When the only difference is, well, it looks like Bigfoot over here. It looks like Dogman over here. It looks like an elf over here. Looks like a troll over here. Looks like a birdman dancing on a cistern in Texas. This looks like a gray alien. But all this Venn diagram is one giant circle. That should bother you. Because maybe we're not dealing with the same, maybe we're dealing with all the same thing, and it doesn't want you to recognize it for what it is.
It's putting those faces in your mind. It is kind of creepy because generally the people I go out with before, they call it the phenomenon instead of calling it names.
Yeah.
A lot of the times because they just don't know what it is. Like earbuds quit working.
Mhm.
I put
Yeah.
my earbuds in and it just they don't do that. They never did that. All of a sudden,
Mhm. But again, you don't. It's not just Bigfoot where they happen. It's a lot of
anything
this
like that.
phenomenon. Yeah, and which is my problem. I don't recall reading in any of Jane Goodall's notes the orbs came back again today, right?
The spaceship landed outside the camp,
Yeah, and the apes got off. It's like
and I got a headache.
exactly. I started vomiting. I lost time. How
Oh.
often
Yeah,
lost?
got
Why
lost
did?
in the woods. Ended up like where you started. You didn't know.
Yeah. Why is lost time a thing for Bigfooters? And it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Almost
not talked
exclusive.
about widely, but it is.
Almost every time. Yeah.
It's not just, oh, I lost track of time. It's I was out there for a few minutes. I come back and it's 12 hours later. I'm sorry. Why is missing time a thing for Bigfooters? It shouldn't be, but you know where it shows up a lot outside of UFOs? The Fae.
Mm-hmm.
I'm beating this. I am flogging this horse to hamburger
I like it.
because
Horse
people,
meat, big in Germany.
exactly. It's very good for you. Very lean. But I'm flogging this horse to hamburger because we need to really have a better conversation here. And we need to start being open to the idea that maybe there is something out there and it wants us to think it's something else so that it can get closer to you, so that it can get in your life. It can get your attention. And maybe it's just, again, Tex. So I was co-hosting Texas Front Porch for a couple of years. And I would like to suggest that I was doing, because I do think playing devil's advocate is a great way to find the truth of things, right?
Mhm.
And I would like to say that's what I was doing, and I wasn't just in a mood that day and wanted to hack him off, but I was. And essentially, he started saying, okay, well, he says, okay, well, maybe Bigfoot's the distraction. I stopped him. I said, I think you hit something. Because what if it is the distraction? Again, I'm not saying that there isn't an ape man thing walking around. I'm not saying that there isn't. I saw a living pterosaur. I've talked to people in this area that have seen them. There's reason to think that there are weird living creatures in the world. However, there's far more evidence for there also being something else. Call them demons, the Fae, Jinn, whatever you want to call them, right? I think calling them the supernatural is better because demons are an actual specific subset of it.
Mhm.
But again, going back to Joshua Cutchins, the ecosystem, ecosystem of the supernatural. It is an ecosystem of beings and entities with differing agendas and thoughts, but it wants to interact with you, and a lot of it's not supposed to be interacting with you, but it wants you to, and that should also bother us. But we go out there, we're not protected. I won't say the name of the person that I've had this conversation with because I don't know if they want it out there, right?
Mhm.
But one of the things that happened, it's a joke now in my group, right? The Texas Front Porch, the Blondes and Booze, we all, when we go researching, it's like Jason has to stay at camp because nothing happens around him, right?
You're a
I was like,
buzzkill out there.
well, it's just stuff doesn't really happen around me now. I mean, there's stuff that has happened, yes, but usually doesn't happen around me. It can happen a little distance off, and if I'm not there, it tends to ramp up. When I'm there, it tends to not happen. But this other researcher I was speaking to, not a part of the group, has mentioned, hey, why is it I'm out there? This researcher is a devout Christian. They've got people around them saying, are you seeing the orbs? They're all over. They're watching orbs moving. And this researcher's like, I don't see anything. There's nothing going on. And there's one right above you. Why are they seeing it, but this other researcher isn't? Now, at the time, the researcher was like, hey, I think maybe it's just the power of suggestion, right? You're going out there, you want to see stuff, and you get a group, people are hyping each other up. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get the whole mass hallucination kind of thing, but I'm going to be honest, I've never liked that because as an artist, I know how people see things, right? And I'm the first one to say, you don't see anything. And if you're unfamiliar with it, you certainly aren't actually seeing it. and this is why magic tricks work. That's why optical illusions work, right? Because your brain's actually processing everything. So I'm right there, and I think you can jazz people up into thinking different things when they saw something that they didn't see, or they saw something they claimed they didn't see it. I'm right there with all of that, right? But my problem is, if you've got a couple people in the woods and you're over there saying, I don't see anything, but they're saying it's right there and it's a big light, then we got a real problem. What it means is you're not seeing it and they are. That means
I've never heard anything of that happening before. It would make sense, especially if somebody's more devout.
And so what it means is someone's getting, again, these people aren't, but this person is. They're seeing it. This person, this researcher I'm speaking to, didn't. That tells me, and again, nothing's showing up on cameras. That tells me we're dealing with something supernatural, and it's either being selective or its ability to influence has been selected for it. And this goes back to the whole point of the Christian worldview. Questions people don't like being asked. Let's move over to UFOs for just a quick second. I don't have a problem with the idea that there may be aliens out there. However, my problem is, why is it there are hundreds of accounts of people ending their abduction by calling on the name of Jesus? Why is it that why is there a if you go through a traditional Christian exorcism ritual, the abduction phenomena stops cold? Why is there such a large overlap of people who have been abducted also tend to have a history of satanic ritual abuse or the occult in their family tree? Why is it that there is such a high concentration of paranormal activity, like poltergeist activity, in the lives of these people who are having encounters with UFOs? If it's Mork from Ork who's popping in, he shouldn't be bringing shadow people with him.
No.
Right? And the problem is, why is it if you're being abducted and you call on Jesus and you're right back in your bed, why is that? Now, again, I do think there's a physical component to a lot of this stuff. And I don't think everyone who's being abducted is being abducted by demons or aliens. I think the government absolutely has as much, and it's not, here's the thing. We know that they are. That's not even a question. The question is who and how many. That's the real issue. And there have been cases of people who've woken up during events and there's real material things going on. But then they're put back to sleep. Right? It's not always the same paranormal stuff. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, let's take that stuff out. There's a huge overlap of the paranormal on this. Why is there the overlap of stories of the Fae? Implants. Which, again, implants are real. I'm here to tell you they're real. I'm not telling you implants aren't real. However, we also have a history of things like thorns being implanted in people who've had encounters with the Fae and elves. Again, missing time. That's a thing with the Fae and elves. You go to fairyland. You go to these things. There's a through line, and our thoughts about this phenomena change, and it changes its shape with our culture. So it goes back to, if they looked like fairies 200 years ago, if they looked like goblins 100 years ago, they look like little gray men now. Maybe the problem is ain't none of them what they actually look like. They are simply taking the form that is culturally appropriate. Again, this is why I really highly recommend Dr. Dean Bertram's work. He's over on Untold Radio. Sorry, not to plug other people's shows, but
no.
He's right now he's working on a documentary on he calls it The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, right? And it's about the old Amazing Stories pulp magazine that came out, and I just forgot the name, the Darrow and the Tarot, and he was being given this information psychically, and I just forgot his name. Ray Palmer is the editor. It'll come to me. But the Amazing Stories, yeah. Anyway, But this is all going on in the 40s. This is before Roswell when this stuff's going on. And again, he's going to punch me in the face when he realizes I cannot remember the dude's name to save my life. Because Ray Palmer was the editor, right? Shaver, the Shaver mystery. That's it. So Shaver, he claimed that he was talking to these these creatures, these robots, detrimental robots, positive robots that are the leftovers of this ancient society, and they're living in the ground, and they have rays, and they're talking to him telepathically, and this is where UFOs are coming. It's like a lot of the stuff that we see with modern ufology comes out of this, but it's just it's painted differently, it's shaded differently, right? And the thing is, a lot of what he was doing is coming from from the earlier 1900s with Theophany, or not Theophany, Madame Blavatsky. We'll go with her because I can't remember. I can never pronounce what she created, which was the precursors to the Nazis as far as their religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But Madame Blavatsky with the Aryan race and the Atlanteans, right? It's the same story, and it just gets recolored, reshaped to fit a new culture. Now it's ancient astronaut theory.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's a big
100
thing.
years ago, it was the Atlanteans and the superior Aryan races. But then before that, it was the Fae, right? These stories are being retold and repurposed. I don't know how old you are. I was there when the Transformers first came to America.
I'm 40.
There you go. So you remember the original Transformers, right? There's a phenomena in the Transformers called the repaint or the redeco, right? And what it is, it's the same friggin' toy, and it's just painted differently, and now it's a new character.
Yep.
The most egregious event of this is Cliff Jumper and Bumblebee. They are the same toy. One's red, one's yellow. The other one was the Seekers, right? The triplets, Starscream, Thundercracker, and Skywarp.
Yeah, they were the same robot.
They were the same robot, but one was gray and red, one was blue and black, the other one was purple and black. Like, it's the same toy.
Because they're all jets.
Precisely. Well, and then you had the cone heads that were later. It was the same toy. They just replaced the head, but they did it because the toy company, right, in Japan, the most expensive part of making a toy is the steel cut dies, right, the things that allow you to make the toys.
Mm-hmm.
So they would maximize the toys by using the same molds and just repainting them. Now you've got different characters, and sometimes they'd switch out the heads, right? And so, like Soundwave and the Autobot little boombox.
Oh yeah.
Again, same toy, different head. They're called repaints and redecos. What we're seeing is the same thing.
Soundwave's the one with the cassette tape in his belly that turns into a doll, Ravage.
Yeah, exactly.
Ravage, eject.
Yeah, I love that. But that's what we're seeing. It's the same phenomena, and it's repainting itself to be culturally appropriate. And by the way, in cultures that are less scientific or in love with this with the science,
yep,
this phenomena tends to show up far more as paranormal. It shows up as elves far more often. It shows up as these other things.
Are you this will sound, are you the first one to associate the Fae with the Bigfoot phenomenon?
No. I'm certainly not. Now I'm among a minority that does, but I am certainly not the first one to do it by any stretch of the imagination. But the problem is, it doesn't look good on the television, right? The TV. It doesn't look good on the TV to point this out. Because again, our culture, they want it to look like they want a guy in a white lab coat coming out.
Yeah.
No,
they don't want the answers. They just want Stephen or like Elon Musk to bring it up or something like that.
Right. No, but that's the whole point. We want the illusion of science because we believe, because our new cultural religion is scientism. It isn't science. Science is a tool, right? But it's scientism. We want the guy in the white lab coat to say, okay, so we've reviewed this and we've run it through a spectrum analyzer and we've laser coated it and we've dipped it into acids. And what we can find is that we don't know what this is. Oh, it's ambiguous and
Inconclusive.
And it's like, oh, well, that's scientific. That's not scientific. It's the illusion of science. But the problem is they don't have any more answers than anyone else, because science, properly understood, is that which is observable and repeatable in a controlled environment.
Mm-hmm.
It is something you can test. That is the point. A lot of this stuff is outside of that realm. If we would, and the problem is, we think because we've got cell phones and cars and satellites and mechanical pencils that we're so smart that we know what reality is. Well, do we? 500 years ago, 600 years ago, if you were to go back in time and say, hey, the reason you get sick is because there's these teeny tiny animals that are so small, you can't see them. That's the language you'd have to use, because the idea of microbes, bacteria, viruses, DNA, none of that existed. You'd have to go and say there's tiny animals so small you can't see them. They'd look at you like you were crazy. The microscopic concept wasn't on the table. It just wasn't there. And here's the problem. We sit here in the 21st century with all of our toys and all of our, and oh, how smart we are. And we think we got this all figured out. The problem is the real answer for a lot of this stuff may not be on our table, or it's either because we just can't, we haven't gotten to that level of technology, or because it's being taken off the table because it doesn't sound scientific. We don't want to look crazy. We don't want to get into, we certainly don't want to be superstitious.
More woo woo.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid.
Yeah. Heaven forbid. Again, I certainly don't want to look crazy on Sunday morning when we talk about the supernatural encounters that have been had. Again, the book is supernatural, people. It just is. But
and by definition, all the characters in it are extraterrestrial.
Well, most of them are human,
Yeah.
but
I mean, like the God and the Jesus part.
Well, so this is, again, words mean things. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's
Hey,
again,
I'm Catholic too, so we can talk.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. But the whole point is they are supernatural. They are not a part of this material realm. They are something super to it. They are above it. And the problem is, if you don't believe in the supernatural, then do you actually believe what you're reading? And I would argue they aren't. And that's why, again, not to get off topic entirely, I argue that's why we have all the other problems that we have. Because we don't actually believe what we're reading. Because if we did, we'd behave very differently. And maybe that's the bigger problem here. Maybe the reason all this stuff seemingly coming out of the woodwork is because all the things we used to do, we don't do. Because we don't want to look crazy. Yeah, we don't want to be superstitious.
I don't know when that started, or when because used to, it's like spirit be gone back in old ancient, what am I trying to say? Like pre-1850.
Yeah.
Like they would call something a spirit or a demon, or like look at Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah.
Be gone, spirit.
The supernatural and having a supernatural worldview was commonplace until the last 100 years. And the problem is our culture's done a really good job of saying, oh, you're crazy if you believe in the supernatural, until very recently. But now it's okay to believe in the supernatural from a very specific viewpoint. Notice the only viewpoint you're allowed to have on the supernatural is a cult. The Christian worldview is, no, that's crazy. That's small-minded. That's bigoted. That's whatever. And it's always who are the bad guys in any UFO show? It's always the crazy preacher, right? Unless it's the government. And yes,
I was going to say the government.
Well, that too, yeah. But if it's not the government, yes, they are the bad guys. Then it's always a preacher. There's always some crazy pastor going, no, they're demons. Yeah. Well, guess what? Maybe that's because they are. Do you think stuff coming out of Hollywood is telling you the truth here, people? You think they don't have an agenda? Do you think it's a coincidence? And again, you want to get into this rabbit hole real fast? Do you think it's a coincidence that just as that all of a sudden we have all these UFO sightings as soon as we start bringing Nazis and their experimental aircraft here to the US, and every single spy show and spy movie that comes out after World War II, what are the spies doing? They're going, they're rescuing the scientists in the hands of the evil people. And they're doing this. They're being forced to do science for evil, but we will bring them here to do science for good. Why do you think that was in every single Mission Impossible and James Bond movie they could cram it into? It was
That's
so
funny
that,
you said.
yeah.
I work where they brought those scientists.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I work on Redstone.
Okay.
Yeah, I see Von Braun every day.
Yeah, we're gonna have conversations. But again, why? Because they wanted us to believe that, oh yeah, scientists, they're always working for good, unless sometimes the evil people force them to do bad things. Because they wanted us to believe it, so that when eventually Operation Paperclip came out, we would be like, well, of course, they were just scientists doing what scientists did, and just it's not their fault that Hitler did bad things with their science. It's like, no. Operation Paperclip was illegal. That's why they did it. And everyone associated with it is literally a traitor by law. That's why it was top secret. Truman didn't want these Nazi war criminals to come here. He wanted them tried. He didn't care. It was the military-industrial complex that wanted them to come here and build weapons for us. That's why we whitewashed them. But again, so let's go back to, if we bring them in, all of a sudden UFOs are everywhere, and that's a whole other conversation. We start putting out these spy movies. Starting in 1980, what do we start seeing with UFOs? Oh, here's the and really we even see it earlier than that. But here's the crazy Christian around saying, oh, they're demons. And that's in every movie. That's in every show. Ancient astronaut theory showed up a handful of times in movies and television shows before 2000. After 2000, every single major with the exception of like Harry Potter and like Fast and Furious, every single major movie franchise has some form of ancient astronaut theory. Some version of it. Transformers.
Marvel does.
Marvel, it's all over Marvel. DC, they had it all over there. Again, the Transformers. Freaking Ice Age. Why is that a part of Ice Age?
Big part of Ice Age.
Yeah.
Whole movie.
So, but I mean, even in the original film, there is ancient astronaut theory. It's a gag, but it's there. Why? Why is it? When I wrote one of the books I did, again, this was many years ago, where I found a half dozen television shows and movies. It's like Stargate, several episodes of Star Trek, and a few other things you could find ancient astronaut theory, right? Quartermain in the pit, or quartermass in the pit. It's like there was a handful prior to 1980, 2000, the movie 2001, things like that. But after the year 2000, there were no less than 30 films and franchises that included ancient astronaut theory. And in all of those, in a lot of those films, not every single one of them, but a lot of them, there are some crazy Christian who's running around going, oh no, it's demons, and the Transformer, get back, Satan. And it's like we're all supposed to laugh because they're aliens and it's a transforming car, or it's whatever. It's not the devil. Okay. Why is that there? Why is it ubiquitous? It's because there is an agenda. Why is it, again, now that we can no longer dismiss the supernatural, everyone's okay with the supernatural so long as it's not the Christian interpretation of it.
Everybody's okay with the Halloween part of supernatural.
Yeah. In fact, in any chance they get to twist or turn it away from Christian, or to make it anti-Christian, it's accepted and it's loved. Any chance we can get to do it, Okay, well, why? Why are you targeting that? Why? Please, can we all stop being, again, I'm not here to say that there's a conspiracy, there's a CIA agent behind every rock, there's a demon and everything, but we do need to stop saying that it's not there, that these agendas don't exist. We know the United States. Yeah, it's there. That we know the government pays for these things. We know they do it. This is how it works. We need to, and again, it's like, well, what does it have to do with Bigfoot? Guys,
everything's the same thing.
It's all the same thing. Do you think if Bigfoot was really like this big, deep, dark thing that the government didn't want you to know about, that there would be 50 different shows on cable right now?
Not to mention Tubi.
Yeah, forget Tubi. I love Tubi.
The B in Tubi stands for Bigfoot, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
The U is UFO.
Yep. Although they've got Babylon 5 on there, and I cannot tell you how much I love Babylon 5.
You got me to thinking, even War of the Worlds is ancient astronaut.
Yeah, to a point.
Because they planted their ships 1 billion years ago.
Yeah, the new one. Not the original. The new one did. They changed it. Why? There's no reason to change that story.
Didn't the book say they planted them a long time ago too?
No, they were meteorites. They came in these meteors.
There was lightning.
That's the movie. That's the new one with Tom Cruise.
I read the book too. I probably just got them intertwined in my mind.
Yeah, that's because originally that was the thing, is it was a meteor shower, and everyone's like, oh, look, here's these meteorites, and these, they're all over the place, and then they started unscrewing and they come out. That was the whole thing, is they came from Mars.
Yeah.
In the original book, and then in the new one with Tom Cruise, they're in the Earth because they were buried there again 1 million years ago.
Yeah, 1 million years ago.
Right. It's like, why does it keep showing up? Well, again, why is Bigfoot? If Bigfoot was this deep, dark secret the government wanted to keep secret, they wouldn't let him out on every friggin' television show. They wouldn't allow it. We know they wouldn't do it. Look at what they did with, and I'll keep it, YouTube friendly. Look at what they did with the beer virus. Or if you have a political view that they don't like, they're more than happy to get rid of you.
The Modelo malaria.
Exactly. And again, we know the government will kill people that they don't like. Journalists. We've got journalists in the 80s who were looking at the fact that CIA was smuggling drugs, or was aiding and abetting the smuggling of drugs into this country to pay for the Iran-Contra. They killed him. We know they killed him, and nothing's happened. How often do we hear of, well, this guy's associated with this thing and he committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head? Clearly it was a suicide. Yeah. It's like, we know that if you get in the way, you're gone. Well, I'm sorry, then why do we have, and there are UFO researchers that at first you're like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You look at them closely, like, okay, no, clearly something's going on. Something screwy is happening. But then you've got, I can never remember his name. Running around.
Alex Jones?
No.
Eddie Bravo?
No.
He has the same theory that if they were real, you wouldn't be allowed to talk about them.
Yeah. Well, no. He claimed that he worked at Area 51.
Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar. Thank you. I can never remember his name.
But he worked at S4.
Yeah. But it's like, but with Bob Lazar, it's like, do you think if he was really telling you the truth, or let me rephrase this, if he wasn't saying what the United States government wanted him to say, that he would have been killed a long time ago?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, again, what does this have to do with Bigfoot? It's all the same thing. If we were close to the truth on all of this, it wouldn't be allowed, because it's the distraction. I'm not saying this stuff isn't important. I believe paranormal researchers is important. I do believe cryptozoology is important. However, we also need to know and recognize that maybe we're being manipulated way more than we realize. Maybe this is designed to keep us not, it's the lovely assistant in the magic trick that's keeping you from noticing what's really happening. Because
that makes sense.
As soon as we start figuring some things out, I think we're all going to have we're all going to be like, hey, wait a minute. And that's what they don't want. That's, again, a lot. Again, I'm not saying every UFO is a government thing, but UFOs were used by the government to hide Operation Paperclip, and probably a heck of a whole lot of other things. A lot of experimentation on you. And again, Mysterious Library, we talked about it a lot. There's all kinds of things you start looking into. You're like, well, actually, this makes a lot more sense about what's happening. Why is it happening always around here with the cattle mutilations?
I think
that's
those are
what
all
they're-
labs. I think the cattle's are all labs.
Yeah. Well, and
Also-
it's, yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. It's like you start looking at some things, and again, there's some things I don't even want to say on air, because people are gonna be like, wait a minute, let me say it this way. A lot of stuff came out of Southern California, religiously speaking, over an 80-year period. During that same period, we had the MK Ultra experiments going on, right? This is going to seem completely unconnected, but it's not.
Go for it. We're ready.
Do you know who? Okay, the lead singer of the Doors, right? Jim Morrison.
Mhm.
You know who his father was?
I've heard it, but I can't remember it. And it was something big.
He was the admiral who oversaw the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Yes.
Please explain to me
How did that happen?
how the guy who oversaw the false flag event that got us into friggin' Vietnam, his son turns into the leader of the psychedelic movement. How does that happen? How is
Sold his soul to the devil almost.
Uh-huh.
Died at 27.
How is it that Walt Disney becomes such great who became such great friends with I can't believe Von Braun. Why does he become such great friends with Von Braun? Oh, by the way, Disney also has connections to the CIA. They helped him get the permits and buy the land in both California and Florida. This is not up for debate. This is not my opinion. That's fact. Why? Why is that the case? Why are these connections run deep? We're just now getting papers released now that are saying the CIA actually is behind gangster rap.
Crack.
And well, yeah, we've known about crack forever, but gangster rap, it's like it's 100 other things, because psyops have been real. They've always been run on us. They're trying to find ways to break us down, to make us, again, Southern California people. Southern California, a lot came out of there. Look at all the religious ideas that came out of Southern California and then starting. The simple fact of the matter is our government has wanted to manipulate us in ways that we don't even think of anymore. In fact, do you understand that not even that 1980, everyone had forgotten about Roswell. Nobody knew about Roswell in 1980. There were books written in 1979 and published in 1980, complete history of the UFO movement. No one's talking about it at all. But then the book comes out in 1980. Also, by the way, that's also when OSI is jacking around with people. Go watch Mirage Men. If y'all haven't seen it, you can, again, find it on Tubi. It's free. Mirage Men's a great documentary, and it really should freak you out. But two people, Stanton Freeman, and I can never remember the other guy's name. I have it here. Hold on. I'm terrible with names, and I have it all saved here. Here's my UFO file, and where's his name? I should have opened it sooner. And that is not. Dang it! That's not the thing I wanted. I had this all written down, and now it's gone. Anyway, so there's two people, Stanton Freeman and the other gentleman whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. Man, this is gonna cheese my crackers, because I had it written down and now it's not there. Anyway, the other dude who's yeah, anyway, the guy whose name I can't remember, it's Michael something, I think, maybe. Anyway, he's the primary movement behind the book. he comes out in the early 90s and admits that he was working with the government the entire time, and that he actually aided and abetted and worked on some of the psyops on certain UFO researchers. That he was, and now he comes out and he says this, and he says, but I was doing it because I wanted to, as I was like a double agent, and I wanted them to think I was on their side so I could really get the truth behind the UFO movement. Okay, that's interesting. So one of the two gentlemen, and we'll come to Stanton Friedman in a second, admitted to working for the government, and that he was aiding and abetting the driving the act aiding the United States government and OSI into driving UFO researchers nuts, literally crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like he was breaking into people's homes. Stanton Friedman, I really wish once I get permission to tell the story as far as who's got what, and all that. But let's just say there's reason to believe that Stanton Friedman was also working for the United States government. The Air Force, very specifically. So the two people who bring Area 51, or not Area 51, Roswell back into public consciousness are working for the United States government. Why? Why is it the United States government goes time after time to say, with these really crazy, no, it's like, this is the worst lie I've ever heard. You people spend tens of billions of dollars on psychological warfare, and these are the lies you come up with? Well, it's because they want you to believe that they're lying.
Mm-hmm. It's
like I haven't had an 8-year-old for a long time, but my 8-year-old can come up with better lies than what the government gives us on air. It's like, so that should tell you they want you to believe something happened there. Why? That's the question. Why do they want us to believe something happened there? Because they clearly do.
There's in Roswell?
Yeah. They want us to believe that Roswell was a UFO crash. Why does the government want us to believe that?
They're covering up the testing is all what I've always heard.
Well, yes, that is. Well, that's definitely part of it, right? Yeah, trust me, that is absolutely part of it. Guy Malone has a great sort of thing on some of the other things that were going on during the time. But my point is, they want us to have this sort of X-Files view of reality. It's specifically season 2 on. Season 1 is when the real stuff was kind of going on, and then the government's like, or you can tell people are like, we need to change our stories here. And they had this the government's in league with the UFOs, and they're, it's like, there was a view they wanted us to have, and they were behind it. They were working with us. They want us. We don't even realize how mistaken or how manipulated we are with all of this. The question is why. I mean, there's 100 different reasons, and I think they're probably all valid, right? That you could come up with. I fundamentally come back to, maybe it's just so we don't recognize what's actually going on around us. Are you telling me that the people who go to Bohemian Grove and perform mock sacrifices to demons
to an owl?
Yeah, to a giant owl statue. It's like, okay, maybe it is just they think it's all fun and games, whatever. Okay, because I do think there's an illusion where a lot of these people just think a lot of it's just, it's just people being weird, and the people who really know what's happening is up here. But the simple fact of the matter is, they're engaged in it. These actors engage in this stuff. Do you think that if, just for 2 seconds, if these people were actually dealing with devils, they'd want us to know that's what they were doing?
No.
Do you think the devil wants us to think that he wants us to know that that you're talking to him, or does he want you to think you're talking to something else?
I think you like the alien idea better.
Yeah. And for some people, maybe Bigfoot's the better idea. Again, I'm not saying that there isn't a relict hominid running around. I think there are. I think there are pterosaurs running around. I think there's all kinds of things running around that are real, tangible, naturally existing creatures. But there's also absolutely something else out there that wants to talk to you and will take whatever form you're comfortable with.
Something far sinister. That's what creeps me out. I thought about that, not to that level before, but like, what if It's just all a big tulpa. Like every single bit of it.
Well, again, like I said, I'm 30 seconds from any given day from saying it's all paranormal. Because here's the thing, once it's paranormal, you can't really research it. All my paranormal researcher friends are like, what do you mean? I've got great. Here's the problem. You know what you ain't got? The Spookatron 5000 patent pending. Right? There is no objective way to no objective way to objectively. We have no technology to objectively observe the supernatural.
Nope.
Like, what about but what about EM? Well, great. These EM field readers. What are you reading? Are you reading it?
Nothing and everything at the same time.
Exactly. It's like, are you actually reading the entity, or are you reading the wake of the entity, or is the entity just jacking with your equipment?
It's just basically reading the part that messes with the camera, is what I think. I've always thought that.
But again, we don't know.
Yeah.
You can't say. Again, here's where it gets worse. What if a lot of the electrical phenomena that we see associated with a lot of this stuff is naturally occurring, but that simply gives them access to us? Like that makes like the weakness in the oddity in the electromagnetic field of an area is what gives them more access to this plane of existence. And so we're walking into a place where it's more. And so the electromagnetic stuff that we're observing is real, but it's a naturally occurring phenomena. The radiation spikes we get are naturally occurring. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying that's a question we don't have an answer for. Because again, is it that when you get that weird EM spike, is that the thing? Is it the wake of the thing? Like someone walking through water and it's the wave that hits you? Or is it just jacking with your system because they think it's funny?
Could be a lot of that. Let me stop you for a second. I'm gonna run to the restroom.
Go for it.
I didn't want to cut it off and be antsy like a little kid.
No, go for it. Go for it.
All right. So we were taking a break during the podcast, and while we were taking the break, Mr. McLean, the guest here, received a voice text message and was listening to it, and it kind of steered the conversation another way. So I figured I might as well brief you, the audience, as to why we suddenly played this random sound clip and kind of took the conversation in another direction. So that was it. He just got a voice text message with a funny reindeer fact from, I think, TikTok or Instagram, and we come back and start talking about that. That's all it is. So enjoy the show. Thanks for watching.
Okay, stay with me. An average reindeer poops approximately 5 times a day. It takes Santa Claus approximately 24 hours to deliver presents to the children of the world. That means that Santa's 8 reindeer will poop approximately 40 times during the journey. Now, the average reindeer poop weighs about 10 grams. If Santa is flying at 32,000 feet and one of his reindeer's poops, the poop will hit the ground with the force of 0.098 newtons. Now, that's not enough to kill you, but you probably don't want to get hit by it. So, stay inside when they're flying by.
That was funny. I was listening to that in the world.
A friend of mine just sent that over, and I was like, okay, that's funny.
Sounds like Rick and Morty.
Yeah, no, there's I've seen him a couple times. There's this guy. It's a puppet, and it's a roll of toilet paper. That's what it's designed to look like. And so all of his stuff is, bathroom facts or whatever. So, and my friend was like, as soon as I saw him, I'm like, okay, it's gonna be funny. Real quick, his best stuff's on YouTube. Do you know who the fat electrician is?
I have heard of him.
He's he's former military, but he just does like
exactly who it is.
History. Yeah, he does history stuff and mostly a lot of military history stuff. Really funny. If you want something that's just a little not, it's just it's a little easier to listen to than than some of the other stuff that's out there. He's really good. I recommend the Secret Cheese Bunkers.
I think I ran up on him on TikTok a few times.
Oh yeah, you've definitely run upon him on TikTok.
Yeah,
but yeah, his YouTube stuff's the best because that's the long form stuff. I love his work. Everything's great. Like, but watch the cheese caves next. You will not. It will make you laugh and infuriated all at the same point. And it's kind of like what we're talking about. Like, nothing is what you think it is.
I think that I've actually seen the cheesecake video
Really?
about how is it some place has more cheese and feed like a whole country or 80 years worth of cheese
Yeah. Well,
underground.
yeah, exactly. So there's this.
Oh, they
right?
bought all the cheese to create a fake market. That's what it was.
Well, so what happened was, okay, this is not for the show, but again, long story short,
It's perfectly fine.
World War II hits because of prohibition, everyone loves ice cream, and so we have all this dairy that the government's like, okay, we need all you dairy farmers we need you to become dairy farmers so we can have dairy for the soldiers. Well, boom, World War II is over. And by the way, there wasn't a huge dairy market prior to World War II because up until refrigeration, you couldn't keep dairy. You just couldn't do it.
Had to be
So
fresh only.
exactly. So now the government's like, well, crap, we put these people in this position. We can't really do it. So they start buying all this cheese or all the milk. And they're like, what are we going to do with the milk? So they start making cheese. And there's this giant bunker. By the time it gets to Ronald Reagan, they're spending $1 million a day to refrigerate this cheese. And so this is where the government cheese program comes from, because they're like, we got to get rid of the cheese somehow, right? Because he's like, I don't want to pay for it anyway. And then by the time you get to Clinton, he creates this again. It's technically a nonprofit, but it's like, well, if you're in the dairy industry, you have to pay them. It's like the Cheese Council or the Dairy Council or whatever. And so from that point on, anytime you see something like brought to you by apple growers or the milk consortium, whatever, it's they're government agencies, but they're not government agencies, and they're funded by the industries themselves to create psyops. The whole got milk thing was created by them.
It's a government conspiracy.
It's all, yeah. Well, the worst part, like the food pyramid is a government conspiracy.
Bro, I've been harping on that. I'm a big ketosis fan. And I feel like $1 million when I'm on it. And when I'm not eating when I eat what they tell me to eat, when Michelle Obama wants me to eat, I feel like shit and get fat.
Exactly.
If I flip the pyramid, I get skinny again and my hair grows. Where are you on manifestation and the law of attraction?
So, okay, so I would say that's the problem is we have people who have great ideas, and this is across the board with everything, right? They have a great idea and maybe a valid observation, and then they make it the whole of the, and then
you get wrapped up on one thing.
Yeah. So I do think, yes, I think there is it's undeniable what you put, you attract what you put out, right? It's a supernatural world that shouldn't surprise us. But I do think the power of positive thinking is more of that positive thinking forces you to not give up. You endure, and it makes you more creative because you're just going to find the solution, right? Instead of where everyone else is like, well, I'm just not going to do it, and then nothing ever happens.
Perfect
right?
Homer Simpson, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I wasn't trying. I was just, but so yeah. So it just comes naturally, apparently. Donuts. No, that was terrible. Anyway, point being, I think the problem is people have they take a valid observation saying, hey, this is probably a better way of doing things, but then they make a whole theology around it. And it's like, well, hold on. That's taking it too far, right? That's where I think a lot of cults come from, is they have a valid observation about maybe something, but then they take it too far and they make it the whole of the thing, right? I believe like the Nephilim, people are always, and it's like, I've been talking about Nephilim for a long time. People come, but so I'm down with the whole Nephilim conversation. I think they're important. I think it's really important to understand the Nephilim. That being said, I don't think they are the key to understanding all of Scripture, right? I don't think the Nephilim are behind everything that's happening today. It's like, yeah,
everybody's favorite subject is Dogman and Nephilim.
Right, exactly. And it's like, guys, it's like, stop. They are important. Yes, they are. There's a big key here. They are important. But put them where they belong theologically, and then move on. Because once you have these thoughts in your head, you're like, oh, I can see how the tines fit together, right? Like the transmission, right? You want to get the tines perfectly synced up. When you have the divine council in your mind, when you have the Nephilim in your mind, when you have the Book of Enoch in your head, a lot of these ideas sync up, and you're like, oh, I see why that's important. I see why Jesus does this. Like, if the Nephilim is in your head, Jesus appearing to the disciples on the beach after his resurrection makes perfect sense. It's not a mystery. Why the numbers, like when you start looking at the numbers of why things like, oh, okay, this is 12 times 10, like it's 120, it was over 120 in, in the upper room. Why doesn't he give us the exact number? Well, because he's trying to tell you something. It's 10 times 12, right? Nothing's a coincidence. It's 8 beatitudes and 2 other endorsements. Why? Because Matthew is telling you Jesus is the newer, better Moses, right? He's fulfilling. That's why he goes out into the wilderness for 40 days and he comes back. And the next thing you see him, what's he doing? He's doing the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes on the Mount. He's Moses, but better. He's Israel, but better. And when you understand that, he's probably dealing with Azazel when he's doing his temptation. Because what's out in the wilderness? That's where Azazel is. That's where sin goes. So when you put these things in your head, it's like once you put those things in your head, you're like, oh, it all works. So again, back to your question. I don't not believe it. I just think the problem is a lot of people have made it more than what it is. And again, that's when things become unhealthy, is when you push it too far. I think the basic premise is fundamentally sound. It's just true.
I do too. I think too many people get caught up on the fact that it's a superpower and not just kind of a process you can make happen. And kind of feeling it's like basically your view of manifestation is of color by number, and you just got to color it in as you go.
And I think a lot of it is, we live in a supernatural universe. There are beings that will give you what you want because they want your destruction. But the other part is, again, the power of positive thinking. Ultimately, I think is just a lot of it is, hey, maybe that means you're not going to give up and you're going to find solutions, because victory goes to he who believes in victory the longest and the hardest. That's just what it is. You make it happen.
That's most of it too, is the blocks they always talk about. I've been on it a lot lately, just studying it, trying to make this thing I'm doing a career. And so I've been studying it. I realize it's not a magic power. Like I pronounce I'm going to do this.
And that's and that's where I draw the line. It's like people are like, oh, it's like a magic power. It's like, no, that's magic. You're not supposed to do that. But it's not magic. It's like power of positive thinking, and we live in a supernatural universe. So just go with God and just it's like valid observations, but y'all are taking it too far. Like, bring it back in here, man.
It's exactly the same as putting it in God's hands, which I've done many times before. And it's the same feeling when each one of them happens. So I'm like, I'll do like one of each. Like if I want something small, I'll do the manifestation thing. If I want something that I can't attain and I got to put it over here because it's ruining my life thinking about it, it's God's hands. Yeah.
Well, and again, it's sometimes it's how we think about it. But my whole thing is like, I was there at the beginning with the Hebrew roots movement, and I watched it devolve from being, we want to understand the Bible on its own terms and really understand what Jesus was saying within his own cultural context. It evolved from that into what it is now. And I'm like, I'm watching this happen. Like, what's wrong with you people? Like, why are you trying to, like, I'm going to become Torah observant? Why? There's literally the entire book of Hebrews is why you're not supposed to do that. It goes from understanding the Bible on its own terms into its own cult. And it's because they took a valid point of, we want to understand the Bible on its own terms, to They take it and they make that understanding the whole of it. And so they've made that pursuit higher than the actual, you're trying to be with God here. And we're trying to understand the message.
Very cultish.
It is.
Screams cultish.
Well, a lot of things scream cult. So
I've actually watched that Netflix documentary on how to become a cult leader, just trying to how to get followers.
What's sad is it's not wrong. It's not wrong, man.
No, it's creepy. You're like, oh shit, I can actually do that.
Yep. It's and sadly, like, this is again something I've talked with my other podcast friends about. I'm like, a lot of this stuff feels very cult like. It's like these people are in every chat all the time. Like, do you not have a life?
Yeah, that's weird. I don't mind it because they're coming to my chat too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, they don't watch the show. They just say hello to each other.
Yeah, they're just talking to. It's like,
yeah.
but it's like that's one thing for one show once a week, but you're on every show every day, multiple times a day,
and you're a moderator for every show every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a cult. Like, you need friends in the real world, son.
Got to get me some of the cult leaders. I got to be like Jim Jones. Get me a Mr. Muggs. There you go. Mr. Muggs is my favorite Jim Jones character. The chimp he shot in the head.
Yep.
In Guyana.
Oh yeah.
We're pushing 2 hours here, and I didn't realize it would go that long, but I wasn't going to stop you because it was getting very entertaining. And I wanted to hear the story about you seeing a live pterosaur because that's you said it a lot at the beginning. I wrote it down. I said I'm not going to stop him. I got to hear
it. So yeah, I do. I have it in my book Metroplex Monsters, but essentially, long story short, I grew up in DeSoto, Texas. It's a suburb of Dallas. Like literally, the northern boundary is Dallas, right? And yeah, you can find all my books on Amazon. And so it was summer of '92, June, like 10:30, 11 a.m. We'd been fishing in the 10 Mile Creek. Main details are a lot of North Texas sits on this giant limestone bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the bigger creeks are cut into that limestone bedrock. And the way, again, the creeks are where the trees are because the trees are where the water is. And so I call it the green wall, right? We've sort of curated our entire society around here where it's like, okay, well, it floods here, so we want to make certain there's plenty of, we don't want to build the houses here. Well, essentially, we end up mowing right up to this wall. And so where the tree line is, that's where the brush is. So you can't see into these things. But so these creeks are often very, very deep, like 15, 20 feet deep, and you don't even know they're there unless you're aware. Well, a few places, the walls will actually collapse in on these creeks, and you can get in there and fish. And it was a great place to grow up. So we're fishing, and we've wrapped up for the day. We're getting ready to go in. And my friend's already gone up the embankment, and he's in the tree line, and he's sort of going up the hill. And I've just hit the tree line, and I hear a noise, and I've never heard it before. It sounded like the closest thing I can describe it to is sounding like an ugly crow. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And it was loud. And I'm like, it felt like it was coming towards my direction, right? So I poked my head out. Now, again, the rock formation sort of collapsed in on itself. So I'm up. I'm in an elevated position where the tree line is because this thing's like 15, 20 feet deep. So I poked my head out and I see what I think, because again, it's a creek and I'm in sort of like the middle of this straightaway, right? It sort of snakes its way around, but I'm in the, like literally where we were is like the middle of this straightaway. So I poked my head out because I'm like, what the heck made that sound? And I see what I think is the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. It's sort of shaped like a blue heron. It's the same color as a blue heron, right? They have that sort of Payne's gray. And it's coming at me, but I can tell because, again, I'm in the creek. I know it's like, how wide it is. I'm like, this thing's like got an 8 to 10 foot wingspan. This thing's massive. So I'm watching it. And then it gets right in front of my face. Its right wingtip is 5 feet from my face. That's how close I am. And I realize it has no feathers.
Ooh.
And what I thought, because when cranes fly, they'll sometimes do their neck in like this S-curve shape thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll stick their legs out behind them. What I thought had been its legs sticking out behind it was a long flanged tail.
Really? Kind of like a...
Well,
Yeah.
more like a diamond, like a rounded diamond.
Oh, okay, okay.
And so it's like a long
Flange.
tail, and then it has this little flange on the end. And then that's when I realized what I'm looking at, and I just watch it, and then it just banks and goes away. Friend of mine comes back down and says, "Hey, are you coming or what?" And I'm like, "Did you just see that pterosaur that flew by?" And he's like, and he laughs and leaves. I don't even tell my dad. He would have believed me. I grew up going to the Creation Evidence Museum. He would have believed me. But I couldn't believe me because I live in DeSoto, Texas, a suburb of Dallas. I told myself it wasn't a pteranodon. Most people think pterosaur, they think pteranodon. Crest, beak, no tail.
Mm-hmm.
This was a rhamphoractoid, no crest, reptilian, more lizard-like face,
Mm-hmm.
long tail with a flange on the end. And it's like, I couldn't believe that I saw it. Here's where things get bad. The next year, The Mysterious Origins of Man come out, and this is the first time I run across David Hatcher Childress, and he's talking about how there was about all the pterosaur sightings seen in the Rio Grande Valley and then the flap in Brownsville in the 70s. Now, you would think at that point you'd be like, well, Jason, sorry, throat's a little scratchy. You think, Jason, you saw a pterosaur, they're seeing pterosaurs. Maybe there's a connection. But I would say, no, Texas is really friggin' big. If they're down in Brownsville in the Rio Grande Valley, they're not flying all the way up to Dallas, Texas. So I didn't believe
It's another
myself.
part of the country, basically.
Yeah, it is. Like people do not understand how big Texas is.
It's 3 states away.
Yeah. So I didn't believe myself for years because I couldn't. Because it's like, well, other people would have to have seen these things, and I've never heard anybody talk about them. Okay. I'm going to flash ahead, and this is the most embarrassing part. I literally wrote a little booklet called Wyvern where I use art history. Because, again, artist, right? I was going to be an archaeologist, kind of saw that wasn't going to work out because I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do. But I was also going to combine a lot of my artistic skills into it because a lot of archaeologists don't understand how art actually works on a mechanical level, right? So they misinterpret a lot of stuff. Well, I kind of saw where that was going. It's like, oh, you find the wrong thing, you're going to become a florist. I don't want to find the wrong thing. So I go and do my life, but I wrote a little booklet called Wyvern where I use art history to show that rhamphoractoid pterosaurs have to have lived up until at least very, very recently. Because I can show how the wyvern, right, is clearly an interpretation of a rhamphoractoid pterosaur looking at artwork made from several hundred years ago. What we consider the dragon's tail or the devil's tail with the little diamond on it, that doesn't enter into any artwork until the 15th century. And that's important because in the 1400s, a French farmer killed a little small dragon, and it was put on display in Paris for about 100 years. The end of its run, now the end of its run, there are 3 artists who over a 20-year period draw what they see. Now here's the thing. What they saw was clearly a gaff. A gaff is like a jackalope, right? It's a taxidermied thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's not real.
Swamp monkey.
Exactly. But here's the key element here. They had no way of preserving this thing. So when the original dragon goes on display, it decays and goes away. So they put up a replica. This is my working theory, and here's why. When you look at the details, it has a tooth coming out of its snout. It has 3 claws on the wing. and has a long tail and one set of legs. That's a freaking ramfractoid pterosaur. These are the three elements. The ramfractoids, the name Rhamphorhynchus means tooth-beaked. It's named because at the end of its snout, it has a tooth that comes out of its nose, literally. And there are drawings of wyverns and replicas of wyverns from that time frame and even later that show a tooth coming out of its nose. It was very common at the time. And again, pterosaurs, 3 fingers on the wing, long tail. This was a ramfractoid pterosaur. Here's the key point about that flange on the end of the tail, right? It enters into heraldic art at that point. Before that point, nobody rendered dragons as having what we would consider a dragon's tail. They just had a normal snake's-like tail, right? It is at this point when that thing goes on display that people are like, oh, that's what a dragon's tail is supposed to look like. And so they start adding that triangular flange onto it. That's 4 points of detail that could only combine if someone saw a ramfractoid pterosaur. So I'm writing a book, or a little booklet, showing that art history tells us these things have been around the entire time. I would even argue that the Jersey Devil, the thing that everyone saw, again, folklore is not phenomena. The daylight sighting that happens in New Jersey that we end up getting the drawing of the Jersey Devil from. If you read the descriptions of the eyewitnesses, it's clear that's what they're doing. They're talking about a ramfractoid pterosaur that they saw. The artist who drew what we know of as the Jersey Devil,
it's like a goat almost.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but the thing is, people describe things from their experience, right? He wasn't taking their sighting seriously. He was taking it literally. So he was just drawing, like they described as having like a deer-like head and bat-like wings. So that's what he draws, right? Okay. But what do they describe it as? It's like, well, it had sort of like a deer head. Okay, well, it's not saying it had a deer head. They're saying it had a head that is not that of a bird. Bat-like wings. That just means leathery wings. They even said it had a long bifurcated tail. That is a ramfractoid pterosaur that they saw. But pterosaurs weren't commonly known. They had no way of describing what they saw. So they did what they did. They just used what they had. Again, going back to the idea that a lot of cryptids are just animals that aren't supposed to be alive anymore. The dragon that we call the cockatrix. It looks completely ridiculous. It's a dragon that has the head and upper torso of a chicken, right? And then the legs and tail of a dragon. Sounds ridiculous. Okay, let me ask you one question. You're bopping around medieval Europe or Persia 2,000 years ago. How do you describe an oviraptor?
Ooh, short. Look kind of fat with that weird head.
But they had a beak. They had a crest. We know that theropods had feathers. How do you describe that? If you're bopping around Persia 2,000 years ago, it's
kind of like how they drew the elephants and camels in the old Middle Ages.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're gonna describe it as like, I saw a dragon that had the upper body of a chicken, right?
Same tail.
And so they're like, okay, this is what it is. So it gets called the cockatrix. If we take it seriously, not literally, we understand they're trying to tell us they saw a theropod, a bipedal, dinosaur that has feathers. That's what they're describing with that. Well, the Jersey Devil was a pterosaur. So flash forward to me. I have written this damn thing. I have known Ken Gerhardt for like a couple of years by this point. Ken Gerhardt, who literally wrote the book, Big Bird, Stories of Pterosaurs in Texas. If anyone's going to believe me, it's this man, and I still won't bring it up to him because I still don't believe me. So, like I said, I'm building the argument that I'm not the sharpest can in the drawer, right?
If you could bring it up to anybody, it could be Ken Gerhardt. He would...
Yeah, exactly. Literally. Years I've known this, like I've known him for like 2 or 3 years by this point. Long story short, I find out that he and Lyle Blackburn, in fact, you can go find it on YouTube. It's the whole episodes, the Demon Flyer. They did the American Monster Tour. They were doing a pitch for a show. You can watch it there. It's my first interview. I've lost a lot of weight since then. And that's the first time I'd ever publicly told my story. Well, the thing that made me realize that I needed to start doing all of this, what I'm doing now, is behind the scenes, they showed me this little statuette that someone who saw in Oklahoma. And he missed the tail, but again, it was further away from him than it was to me. But he did the S curve thing with the neck. And that's when I realized because he thought he saw a crane. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to do this myself. I now have, last time I talked to Ken, he said he had over 50 accounts of pterosaurs, and I've got others that don't include his. But all of mine are from North Texas, from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. And everyone says the same thing. I thought I was looking at a heron or a crane or a pelican. I got one owl because it was at night, but the thing flew right in front, again, in the book. Hold on, I have a whole spiel. Give me a second.
But hung himself on the headset.
Smarter man would have had it ready. Metroplex monsters, Dallas demons, Fort Worth goatmen, and other terrors of the Trinity River. Available wherever fine books and trashy rags are sold. Anyway, but
Trashy
she said
rags,
it was
baby.
Exactly. But anyway, she said an owl because it was at night, right? But it flew right in front of her car. I have accounts that I've never put out there because I don't necessarily think that they're credible. I only put out the credible ones. I have 2 nighttime encounters that I think are credible. One of them isn't in here. Everything else is during the day. You cannot, and everyone says the same thing. That was a pelican or a crane or a heron. And then I took another look at it. Everyone says the exact same thing. Because I think one of the ways these things have stayed hidden is I think they're mostly nocturnal. But they look enough like cranes and herons when they fly that when we're all bopping around, right? And we're just hanging out. I got to put this somewhere. There we are.
I was about to ask you where you think they went during the day.
Well, I think they're probably just, again, they're reptiles. They don't have to be as active as like birds do, right? So I think they probably are hanging out in caves and other they find locations, they hang out, they don't have to eat as much. So they're probably just hanging out. But the thing is, we spend all of our times on these stupid things, or we're driving to and fro, right? One of the concepts I write about in the book is the green wall, like I described earlier. We partition ourselves from nature. All these things were much more well known over 100 years ago. People talked about this stuff all the time. Why? Because they were in nature. We live on these little concrete islands. We drive on these little concrete bridges. I know a road isn't technically a bridge, but it's a metaphor, right? To another concrete island that we build. And we mow the grass up to a tree line, which means right there where the tree line starts, the shrubs can grow tall. We encase ourselves in this green wall that you can't see into. You can't see 2 feet into a green wall. You could march elephants, an army of elephants, through most creeks in the North Texas and pretty much anywhere. As long as you're on the other side of the tree line, no one's gonna see anything. There are over 1,000 feral hogs living in Irving. If you don't know where Irving is, that's where the Fritos manufacturer is. But in Dallas, Irving is a continuation of the city of Dallas's urban sprawl. That's all it is. And yet still, there are 1,000 feral hogs. These are not teeny tiny things. Nope. Big things that tear up and cause thousands of dollars of damage. Nobody sees them ever. Why? Because of that wall. because we partition ourselves off from nature. These things are probably critically endangered. The pterosaurs are critically endangered. Very small, highly mobile population. And we're not looking for them because you don't want to be the crazy person who saw a pterosaur. I didn't want to be the crazy guy who saw a pterosaur, but I did.
That's wild. I wonder if they're like if they're seen in the Arkansas flyway and everything. Like
They're
just
seen all over the
nobody-
place. All over. Dude, there are accounts all over this country and all over the world, really. But the ones that I look at, they seem to be in the North Texas, Southern Oklahoma region. They seem to move west. I think they may be coming here to breed and then they move out. I can't prove that yet, obviously, because we don't have one. But
yeah, and if you're more than 100 yards from them, you wouldn't see they're any different than any other big bird.
If you're 20 yards from them, most
Yeah.
people aren't going to give them that because, again, they're the same coloration. They're either reddish, and I think some have described a crest, like a small crest on them. Others
But they don't have the pterodactyl.
right, yeah,
pterodactyl thing.
yeah. But some have described a small crest. But again, the colors I've gotten are like a reddish brown, or again, mine was a Payne's gray. I've gotten both colors. Well, okay, people are like, why are they different colors? It's called sexual dimorphism. Everything has it, right? The males look different from the females. But the simple fact of the matter is that's assuming they can't change color. And that's assuming the head crest isn't an age thing. But because again, they're reptiles. We don't know what they can do. But they look
Yep.
like herons when they fly. That means most people probably don't recognize them when they see them. And the people who do shut up pretty darn quick, just like I did. Because they don't want to be the crazy person who saw the pterosaur. Because dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. They can't be around today. And that's why we're not allowed to talk about them.
Now I'm going to be looking at every crane.
Well,
Hang out by water a lot.
Here's the worst part, right? I may have seen it. I may have seen them 2 other times much more recently. But here's the thing. Because I didn't get a good enough look or long enough look, I won't allow myself to think I have. Because this is one of those things where, again, part of this community, we want, once you've seen something, once you've encountered it, you're looking for it. Well, guess what? You're prepping your brain to see it.
Mm-hmm.
There was one, I was driving down south. Again, it's literally the same creek. And again, one of the accounts in this book is from 2 women who saw it in the creek, right where I was, not where I was, where I saw mine, but this other encounter. I'm driving south on 35. And it was it was much darker black, right? But I could see it at a distance. It was flying up. It was beat. The thing is, I couldn't look at it long enough. It just looked like the wing, like it was flapping its wings to get up and get over the trees to get into the creek. I couldn't look at it long enough to really get a look, but it felt like the way the wings were moving, they weren't moving like vulture wings. They were moving like almost like bat wings, right? Like they were more doing this than flap. And it just looked way larger than I see turkey vultures all the time. If you're in North Texas, you know what a turkey buzzard looks like. This thing was massive because I'm going south on 35 and it's across the highway from me and I can see it. That's how big this thing was. I want to say that I saw it. That I saw a pterosaur here, or that saw it again. Here's the thing. I won't allow myself because I didn't see it for a long enough period of time. My encounter took when I was 11, 12. It was, 15, 20 seconds of me just looking at this thing. It wasn't 2 or 3 seconds. This was 15 or probably 15 or 20 seconds really of watching this thing fly. And it got within 5 feet of my face. I know what I saw. Now, I'm also willing to say maybe it was paranormal. Until a body shows up, I can't say it wasn't paranormal, right? But enough people have seen them. The description, again, people who have no reason to see this, right? They're not mentally prepared.
Is the tail consistent?
Across some of them, yes. The problem is not everyone sees the tail, but the problem is it doesn't mean the tail isn't there. It just means they're focused on
paying attention.
Yeah. Again, how people see things is a really interesting study unto itself, right? But Everyone, these are not people who are out there looking for this thing, but they all see the same thing. I thought I was looking at this, and then I looked again, and it was not what I thought it was. And so the descriptions are consistent, the encounters are consistent. That would lead me to believe this is a physical creature we're looking at. Same reason I look at a lot of Bigfoot encounters, say these are consistent descriptions of people who were not prepared for them, and we don't see other associated paranormal phenomena. I'm willing to think that's a physical, organic creature walking around. But when you have a lot of people who are primed to see things, like they're psychologically priming themselves to see, they want to go on a Bigfoot research, and they go in the field and they're like, here, Bigfoot, Bigfoot, and they're knocking on trees. It's like, okay. And then, of course, you have the associated paranormal phenomena. I'm going to say maybe that wasn't a Bigfoot. But there's enough there for me to say, I think that there are living pterosaurs. I think there's a good chance there being a living Bigfoot. And I think there have been other creatures that we would have considered to be dead, tens of thousands or millions of years ago, that people see today, or up until the very recent past, last 1,000 years. And they come down to us as mythological creatures because we don't know what to do with them. Because they're not supposed to be here, according to the modern current paradigm that you're forced to believe.
Science.
It's the science. Well, but okay, but science is something you're supposed to question. You can't question this. Again, if we live in a world where there are dinosaurs and supernatural events, we don't live in the world that our schools told us that we lived in. We live in a world that looks a heck of a lot more like what you read in the Bible. And that scares a lot of people.
And it threatens a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Threatens the head of the snake.
Yes, it does.
More than
Again,
anything.
the materialist witch. You have to find a way to avoid thinking about God, which is why now that we can't avoid the supernatural, we have to find a way to think about the supernatural without thinking about God.
You can't avoid the possible demons, so that makes them aliens. So a lot of that going on.
Yep.
This has been a crazy good conversation, and I will wrap it up an hour after I usually go, because this has been so much fun that I wasn't expecting it to be this much fun on a Thursday before Christmas. And I should have done more deep diving on you. This is the most intense. This is like gotta do 3 more episodes like this.
Hey, I'm always around.
Hey, the biblical thing, I would be willing to go on that just separate.
Well, and again, as we mentioned earlier, right? I'm not here because I care about Bigfoot. I'm not even here because I care about pterosaurs. I really don't. Again, my work was in eschatology. But I'm here because I recognize that the world. I focus in the beginning of the book, that's creationism, which ties into cryptozoology, and the end of the book, that's eschatology, that's the paranormal, it's all of it. Because if the beginning of the book is true, the end of the book is true, then the middle of the book is what really matters.
So it ties it all together.
We live in a world created by a God that wants to know you personally, sent his son to die for you, and is offering you a chance to live forever. That's what matters. Your life matters. You are not a mistake. You are not some random bit of matter floating through an uncaring cosmos. You are one of the most important creatures to ever exist in the universe.
I believe it.
And the reason I care about these things is because they are the evidence of that worldview. Our world tries to tell you that you're just a bit of flotsam in some cosmic stew. That nothing
all
cares.
up from the ocean.
Exactly. You're just some random bit of something, and nothing ever really matters, because they have to tell themselves this because they want to do terrible, terrible things to human beings. And you can't do that if humans are of immense eternal value. You are of immense eternal value. The fact that we have and see these creatures, paranormal, physical, cryptozoological, they're the evidence that this world is what God said it was. And the problem is we can't keep avoiding the reality of God and of his son, the Messiah, Christ Jesus. I'm not going to shy away from the people like, oh no, you don't want to offend people. No, the truth's
I
offensive.
kind of do at some point.
Yeah, like I'm sorry, it's like it's not just there's a God out there. No, there is the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's real. He wants to know you. He wants to have a relationship with you. He wants to spend eternity with you because you are of eternal value. The world's going to tell you you're not. I'm going to tell you you are, but it's not because I think you are. It's because he said you are.
That seems to be the deep state's whole MO is to keep everybody down.
Yeah.
Everybody down the low vibration. You're not anything. You're not a miniature demigod at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because again, it makes it a lot easier to do terrible, terrible, terrible things if you're just dealing with cattle.
Hell yeah. Might make that the episode title. It's been a great one, man. I'm floored over here. Oh, should have made more coffee.
I did not sleep at all last night. I was like, man, this
Boy,
show's going to be really interesting. I
Well,
got
you
no
showed
sleep
out.
at all.
All that cocaine you did beforehand really paid off.
Hey, that's
what Zenith really is.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. We actually do have like the Zenith is like just for, it's just leptin resistance, but it does give you more energy. My wife literally would do nothing over the weekends because she couldn't do anything. Once she started that, she was like up and doing things. The headset made it even better, but they do have the stuff for, it's called Uplift. It's better than caffeine. They call it caffeine evolved. It's, so caffeine turns into paraxanthine. That's the metabolite that caffeine turns into, right? That's what actually gives you your boost of energy. Like it's not actually it's not caffeine.
Yeah.
It's paraxanthine. Well, they have some other things in there. They're finding that's better than caffeine. It's longer lasting. It doesn't have the you don't get the jitters from it because there's no sugar. But they also found that it's a nootropic, so it's actually protecting the brain. And so people like they're doing this study right now with everything's done. Like they've got studies on everything. That's why we did it. The headset is a bunch of studies. It's nuts. But they're doing this study with these e-gamers, and they're finding that it's not only providing longer lasting energy and focus, it's actually protecting the brain the longer they use it. So it's actually making them faster, smarter. So yeah, it's insane. But yeah, I haven't slept at all. Like I didn't sleep at all last night. And I was like, man, this show is either going to be really terrible or really fun. So I'm glad it went the other way.
It was fun. How can everyone find you out there website wise or kind of
so right now, I am sort of I'm sort of in between things. Like Syrup Papers is up, but it's just kind of a placeholder. I'm making some changes. I'm going, like I said, I retired from being a content creator. I want to go back to doing books. So what I'm doing is Syrup Papers is going to become, it's going to go back because really Syrup Papers has been what I've been doing for the last few years, 10 years actually, and it was an actual society. We were trying to, the problem is I found that people suck. So I'm taking it back to what it was originally, which is a fictional story. It's gonna be a magazine that I put out once or twice a year if I can. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be comics and pulp stuff, and it's gonna be all of this from my perspective. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I do recommend it, and I'll let you know when it comes out. But I'm also creating a new website called The Christian Paranormal Perspective, and that'll be a new book or series of books I'm going to come out with. And it is to sort of, I mean, not the definitive Christian perspective, but to present the Christian perspective on all of these materials, UFOs, paranormal, cryptozoology, and make it clear and show the evidence. Like I had one, a little short booklet called How UFOs and Bigfoot Prove the Bible is True. It's basically just that on steroids. And to show all of the act, because that was supposed to be a primer. I didn't think that I was of any importance. So I'm like, let's just whet your appetite so you can go research it yourself. And finally, after a few, like 5 years now, I realized I have to be the one to put that out there. That's why I'm here. So I'm going to do a series of books on how this all ties in and why it matters. And then show you the research, right? Show you the material. Like when people show you the helicopter that was in hieroglyphics. That's not a helicopter. It's actually two different. It's Ramesses and Seti II. Their names are overlapped.
Oh, man.
And then show you how to prove it, right? How to read it. I was actually on Coast to Coast AM, and they asked me about the golden, the little golden airships.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I stand by as an artist, I said, whoever made those was close enough to touch them. And I thought they had to be a Delta shaped aircraft because they flew and they look like it. But they're not. And when you really look into it, it's very clear. They're literally the sucker fish, those little catfish that you get to clean your tank. They come from that river that runs through where those artifacts were found. And they get to like 18 inches, 2 feet long when they're in the wild, right? But the thing is, you're never shown, hey, this is what a Pleiku looks like. And this is, by the way, what all the other artwork that they were making at the time, this is what that looks like. And when you put them side by side, you're like, oh, I see the exaggeration that culture did with their art. And yes, they look like Pleikus. They have all the features.
I can see where it looked like a fish.
Yeah. And that's the thing and so I want to be able to show people, it's like, hey, this hieroglyphic, you can read this. This isn't some secret thing. You're being lied to on a lot of this stuff, like the Ezekiel's wheel. You're being lied to about that, and even a lot of Christians have fallen for it. As far as what when you see the pictures of angels where there's like they're wheels within wheels, and it's like, no, that's all wrong. You're misunderstanding the text because you bought into this one line. You omit the rest of the text. So it's going to be exploring all of these topics and showing you how to actually look at it and not fall for what is really the biggest psyop in the world.
Damn, it does look like a fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's worse is if you look up the other golden artifacts that they found in that, that culture made, the Quimbaya artifacts, look at all of them. When you see how they exaggerate like frogs' feet, you're like, well, that's clearly a frog. You can see how they
got an alligator.
Yeah. When you look at, and then you look at you look at the Quimbaya, the airships, you realize, no, that is the Pleiku. They just exaggerated the fins. That's all they did. Right. You have to compare art to art, right? What is that culture making? How do they make it look? So the book will show all of that and do things like I'm going to interview other people. It's like, again, how have we been manipulated by the United States government to believe in UFOs, that they are extraterrestrials? What's the evidence? What is the evidence that these things are supernatural? Right? Yeah. So, and here's the thing: most of those you only see like a small handful because a lot of these, yeah, exactly. And the other one just a little further to the right, like you only see a couple of these because a lot of them's like, okay, hold on, that's clearly a fish, and that's not a thing. It's like
this one looks like a sturgeon. Yeah,
well, and again, they're basically a bunch of different fish. There are some that are so my favorite one is the one in the upper left hand corner. Okay. It has these little circles on the what look like the wings, right? Those are the fins. There's a Pleiku that has these whiskers on it that on the fins, they turn like these little circles. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're representing. And stop to think about it. Just ask yourself one question. Because they'll lie to you about those things and they'll say archaeologists have no idea what they are. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a big fan of archaeologists half the time because they can't identify everything, though they claim to. But a whole other kettle of fish. That's a whole other episode. We have hundreds of artifacts, and you can clearly tell what they are. Like this is this specific type of bird. This is this type of fish. This type of insect. This type of whatever. Right? Frogs. There's a handful that look like this. So here's my question. If those were the chariots of the gods, why is it that there's like 8? Because you don't see they never show you the rest of those things. They only show you like 2 or 3, really, but they'll put out like 8 on the Ancient Alien shows, right? Why? Because if you were to see enough of them, you'd realize, oh, yeah, I see what the rest of the culture was making. But why would they only make like 8? Let's say they made 10 or 20. Let's say they made 50 of them. We have hundreds and hundreds of artifacts. All of them naturalistic. Why would they only make a handful of the chariots of the gods? Why don't we have them rendered writ large in stone? Right?
Yeah, like pyramid size.
Yeah. Why aren't they making these massive stone monuments to the chariots of the gods? Why don't they do that? Well, because it's not what these things are. But what we do, again, the culture is lying to you. People are lying to you. And some people are just mistaken. I think Von Daniken is a good guy. He's just mistaken. But we have to be able to have better conversations. That's what the books will be. So that's coming out later this next year. And again, we're going to have some fun. We're going to do some serious stuff. But I'm going to be around.
These are like doctoral level topics here. I feel like we just did a webinar.
Well, you didn't have me on here because I'm sexy. That's a benefit.
Don't sell yourself so short there.
Oh, I don't. No. Hey, if we wanted to increase the audience, I didn't do this top button here. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, Duluth Trade Company called. They want us to model for them.
There you go.
All right, man. We'll hit that to go video. I couldn't come up with the word video, exit video, and we'll talk to you next time you're on. This was amazing, and thanks again, everybody. Jason McLean, Saru Papers. Peace.
I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it. I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.